Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Tuesday, November 9th. We have a great lineup on today's show. We are going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Mark Fussell, who is the partner program manager over at Microsoft, and he founded the Distributed Applications Runtime project, also known as Dapper, in 2019, which has become one of the fastest growing open source projects, changing the landscape of how to easily build distributed applications on platforms like Kubernetes. So the CNCF Technical Oversight Committee just recently decided to accept Dapper as a CNCF incubating project. It's great news for Mark and for anybody who uses Dapper. So Alan and Mark talk about the technology and what it means to the open source landscape. It's a great conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Mark Lambert, who is the VP of Product Marketing at Applitools, and Torsten Volk, who is the Senior Analyst at EMA Research. The two of them discuss, or the three of them, I should say, discuss the findings of a new report called Disrupting the Economics of Software Testing Through AI. And the report identifies some of the critical factors that hinder software engineering and DevOps teams, including the escalating costs of quality control and growing complexity associated with increasing release velocity, number of smart devices, operating systems, and programming languages. There's a lot to unpack in this report, and their conversation does a really good job of giving us the highlights. It's a great conversation. After that, we have our Devops Unbound series. This is episode 21. I can't believe we've gotten so many in so far. This one is called Leading a Devops Transformation, Lessons Learned. And in this one, Alan and Mitchell Ashley, the hosts, are joined by Gary Groover of Groover Consulting, William Barry from Tricentis, and Tracy Bannon of MITRE. And they're going to introduce some best practices for a successful DevOps transformation, as well as talk about some of the challenges and cultural changes that come with it. They hope that they impart some insight into how DevOps transformation was done in their organizations, and basically discuss their journey and some of the lessons that they learned along the way. So great presentation. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes Virtual Summit. This one features Karina Varela, who is the Principal Technical Marketing Manager over at Red Hat, and her presentation is titled Best Practices for Architecture and Delivery of Decision Logic in the Cloud Era. So she discusses some of those best practices and strategies for delivering automated decision logic in hybrid cloud environments. It's a great primer, great how-to presentation on ways in which organizations can utilize decision logic, and it's a great presentation if you're if you're into that decision logic technology, wanting to learn more about it, or if you're just interested. It's definitely one worth checking out. After that, I'm back with the news, and then I have a conversation with Steve Bomberger, who is the head of SEI Sphere. And Steve and I talk about the importance of business strategy and culture aligning with an organization's cybersecurity strategy and how critical that is for success. Also, we talk about why it's important to have a strong security measure for remote workers, and what type of security measures companies should provide remote workers that actually don't slow them down in the process with their productivity. And also how remote and hybrid work has amplified the need for a strong cybersecurity plan. Steve is a great person to talk to. He's got a lot of knowledge on cybersecurity in general, and he's got some great insight into how organizations need to approach cybersecurity with this hybrid and remote work environment that we now are living in. So it's a great conversation. After that, I speak with Luke Tenery, who is a partner at StoneTurn, and we discuss the ongoing state of play between private industry and government around the proposed cyber reporting regulations currently under consideration. We've been hearing a lot about the federal government and President Biden's executive orders regarding cybersecurity, and so Luke and I talk a little bit about what we can basically expect from the White House, from the federal government, environment in the way of cybersecurity compliance regulations and how private industries are going to have an impact in that as well. It's a great conversation. All right, after that, I have the webinar's preview for you. And then Mitch Ashley comes on with his Analyst Corner segment. He's back, folks. In this one, he speaks with Katerina Pinto, who is the she's a digital transformation manager over at Henkel Corporation. And they discuss low code and the role that it is playing in Henkel's digital transformation effort by connecting remote workers with 30 shop floors around the globe. And so Katerina and Mitch talk about how the team is leveraging low-code technology to deliver weekly releases across 10 apps and the role that HCL software is playing as well. Andrew Manby also joins in on the discussion. He's the AVP of Product Management, and it is a great conversation between the three of them. After that, we round out the View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Shen Long, who is the President of Engineering and Innovation at SUSE, and they discuss how SUSE's recent acquisition of NewVector is going to help improve container security. Good stuff there. All right, we've got a great show on tap, and we are going to get things started right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back, everybody. Kicking off today's broadcast is a conversation between Alan and Mark Fussell, who is the Partner Program Manager over at Microsoft, and he is the founder of the Distributed Applications Runtime Project, aka Dapper, which was just elected as an incubating project over at the CNCF, the Technical Oversight Committee, voted to accept it as a CNCF incubating project. Dapper is a really great technology for Kubernetes and open source in general, and Mark and Alan talk about the technology and why it's very important that the CNCF has accepted it as an incubating project. Great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for Techstrong TV. My guest for this segment is Mr. Mark Fussell. Hey Mark, welcome to Techstrong TV.
It's fantastic to be here and to join with you today, Alan.
Thanks to have you. It's actually our pleasure. You know, Mark, CNCF, open source, Kubernetes, these are kind of the meat and potatoes of our coverage. That cybersecurity, obviously developers, DevOps, is kind of the beat around here. And, you know, we get excited when we hear about a new project coming into CNCF. And so I'm really happy to be talking about that today. But before we jump into it, you know, why don't you share with our audience, who's Mark Fussell? What do you do?
That's a great intro. Yeah, so my name's Mark. I'm a partner program manager that works at Microsoft today. I've worked at Microsoft many years. I've worked in a lot of developer technologies and built a lot of cloud services and cloud systems across Azure and worked greatly in the open source. And I was one of the co-founders of Dapper project when we first started this a few years ago. So I call myself an open source advocate, great in the open source community, and like to work on building distributed applications and working with developers.
Great. And so, as you mentioned, you're one of the co-creators, if you will, of the Dapper project, and that's DAPR. Right. But why don't you share with our audience, what does Dapper stand for?
Well, Dapper stands for Distributed Application Runtime. And it came about as looking at the problem space that developers had to do when they had to build these scalable distributed applications. So we saw there's problems that developers were struggling with, and we came up with how do we make their world easier?
Excellent. And when did you start the Dapper project, Mark?
It was first conceived kind of the end of 2009. We started pulling together ideas from much of our experience of having not only built services ourselves on platforms like Azure, but have really experienced the developer pain that they were going through. You know, there's been this step change of how developers have to build applications. So it was conceived about 2009, and then we first released it to open source community in October of 2020. So it's been out just over 2 years now.
Excellent. So that's kind of a long gestation period, if you will, right? 10 years or about 11 years. What took place during those 11 years?
Oh, I must have called. I said 2000. Did I say 2000? I said 2019.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. I thought you said 2009. I'm
Yes.
saying, boy, I guess this existed in his head for a while. You know?
Yes, I must have. I made it. Yeah, I meant 2019. So it wasn't
Got
very
it.
big, actually. We started in 2000.
Yeah, it was just a year. That's more like it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought this was like an elephant giving birth or something, you know? It was going to take a while. But that makes a lot more sense to me. All right. So, and of course, Mark, the big news today that we're talking about is that Dapper has now been kind of given a home with the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, part of Linux Foundation, and it's officially an incubated project. Right?
Correct, yes. And we're thrilled by this because, it signifies the maturity, adoption, the community engagement. From a perspective of also sitting on the Dapper steering and technical committee, we're thrilled that CNCF is embracing the developer ecosystem. And we feel that, under the guidance of CNCF and the stewardship of that, the Dapper will fully mature and grow and, be adopted across, many of the developer ecosystems that we're seeing.
Yep. Now, Dapper was already pretty popular to begin with, right? I mean, I don't know if you have metrics you can talk about, but it was one of the more popular projects out there.
Well, it's had a rapid growth. I mean, this is what we're pretty thrilled about. We released it first as the first preview project in October of 2020. So, it's been out there for 2 years and it's had a rapid growth, to about 15,000 GitHub stars. We have over 1,300 contributors to the project. We have 200,000 page views across the project itself. And the community has rallied around it and built all sorts of components and deliverables into Dapper itself. And I think that's because it solves good, hard problems for developers. Developers have had this step change that they've had to do where they're moving from developing sort of these very traditional client server applications in the 90s and the 2000s and having to build these distributed cloud applications now. And so, what does Dapper give them? Dapper gives them these sort of best practices, building blocks that they can use and APIs that enable them to build these portable distributed applications. And so this helps them solve, the problems that they're dealing with. And these set of APIs allow them to be effective in terms of how they design and build these applications. So yes, the growth has been amazing inside the community, and we're thrilled and we want to keep that going.
Absolutely, and that's great stuff. Now, Mark, our audience, as we spoke about off camera, is fairly technical. They're familiar with CNCF and open source in general. They may not be familiar with the life cycle, if you will, of a CNCF project, right? Up until maybe last year or the year before, incubation was kind of the first stage of the CNCF folks taking a project under their wing. I think, though, sometime during COVID or around when that first started, they came up with this notion of a sandbox, which is almost like pre-incubation, right? For projects that are not quite as popular yet. So the fact that this project is going right into incubation, not sandbox, I guess means that even though it's only 2 years old or thereabouts, it's got enough momentum and followers and contributors and a big enough community that it's an incubated project.
Correct. Yes. And that's what's been so exciting for us, in terms of the rapid adoption of Dapper inside the developer communities. And I think we're talking about all developer communities here. So you're right. Yes. Sandbox is open to many projects. Incubating projects inside CNCF establish, really core hard requirements that you have shown due diligence and that, you've hit, fairly significant metrics that CNCF require. Things like, you have a stable open release that you can build production applications on, that you have real world applications. We have customers like Alibaba, or adopters like Alibaba and Zeiss, Bosch, and sort of big enterprises who've built real applications on top of Dapper and running them in production in terms of top of Kubernetes. That you have a healthy, growing community, with over 1,300 contributors to the Dapper project. We're seeing a healthy growth of those. So all of those are sort of fairly strict criteria that CNCF plays upon the project, and the fact that Dapper has met that, has shown the thrill that it has inside the developer world. And so that's where we'd like to kind of continue the momentum with it, and with it now being accepted into CNCF, we're going to see that accelerate.
So let's talk about that. So now it's a CNCF project. I've had the pleasure, one of the projects that I follow personally, well, two projects that I followed pretty personally, the CNCF were Helm and Linkerd, right? And we've got William. So the point I'm trying to make is you as sort of a co-creator of the project, just because it's now a CNCF incubated project, doesn't mean that, you're absolved from your day-to-day duties of servicing the community, of being a member of the community, of growing the community, of making the project better and the software in it better. You're still going to be involved right up to your ears, I assume.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yes. In fact, the biggest desire is to open it up to as broad community as possible. It's been a desire from the very beginning to make sure that Dapper has a vendor-neutral aspect to it all. We have a steering and technical committee that has members on it from Intel, Alibaba, and Microsoft, and we're going to be growing that to include other organizations. And we've had contributors from across the board, from including VMware and many other of these organizations. So yes, growing the community, being actively involved, making sure that it remains as a vendor-neutral technology, making sure that many other companies come in and contribute to this is a primary goal of this. Because we see Dapper as being very influential inside the way you can build cloud-native applications. If I just take a step back and just talk about what Dapper is,
Sure.
Dapper is a set of APIs that allow developers to build these, and that encodify these best practices that allow developers to build these cloud-native applications very easily than they could before. So, before you'd be struggling about how do I do communication between two services. Dapper solves that by allowing you to discover where those services are, does secure communication between those two services, does it retry between them all in case of event failures. Dapper also sort of codifies an API for publish and subscribe for an event-driven application. So you can actually do events between your applications. And importantly, you can plug in any different backing stores of your choice for long-running stateful services, for example. So Dapper allows you to create long-running stateful services through a consistent API where you store state in a backing store. So these are the problems that developers have to deal with. They have to deal with, how do I build stateful long-running services, be event-driven? And up until now, they were given a wonderful platform like Kubernetes, but then they had to go off themselves and build all of this sort of developer infrastructure to build these applications. Dapper now elevates them to give them the superpowers in a consistent way. And this is the key. The key for Dapper is it embraces all developers, whether you're a Go developer, a Node developer, Java developer. It doesn't require you to be boxed in and take on a particular framework. You can come at it from where the technologies you are today, because it simply allows you to use one of the APIs or two of the APIs of your choice. And from there, you can slowly adopt it and migrate existing code forward to become sort of cloud native and scalable. And so that's what we see is why it's been so successful. It's not requiring you to throw away your existing code. It allows you to incrementally adopt, use the APIs of your choice, become productive as a developer, and importantly, makes your code portable between different sort of clouds, whether that's public clouds like Azure, AWS, or GCP, or including things on the edge. And that's kind of been a lot of its value prop, and developers realize that by using Dapper's APIs, they can now become productive in building these cloud native applications.
Excellent. And we should mention, only because I think it bears mentioning, Mark, the fact that, you are at Microsoft and worked on the cloud team, obviously Azure is part of it, but Dapper's not an Azure specific, and it's not even, frankly, Kubernetes specific from what I understand.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in no way is Dapper tied to any particular public cloud. There's no way it's tied to Azure or GCP or any of these other ones. It can run on any platform. In fact, and as also what you mentioned, it isn't even tied to Kubernetes. We have a great case study from a company called Man Group, who took an existing set of VMs that they had inside their own data centers, and they built a very application that was running on Windows. It used kind of technologies from the 90s. They wanted to modernize it all. It was just a set of VMs. They used Dapper to Dapperize their existing application. They could do this secure communication. They can use Dapper for managing the state of their applications, make them long running, and they modernized it. It was just running on a set of VMs inside their own data center. So yes, it can run on a number of different platforms. Whether that's also down to small devices themselves. So it'll even run on a set of Raspberry Pis as an ARM installation,
really,
all the way up to the cloud. And that's also the beauty of it. You can run it in many of these different environments.
Got it. Let's return back to CNCF, though. As a CNCF project, though, beyond playing on a bigger stage, there are other advantages, right, of being an incubated project there. Why don't you share them a little bit with the audience, if you don't mind?
Well, the advantages of being as part of CNCF is that, it takes it so that it goes into this vendor-neutral aspect that allows anyone to be able to now contribute to the project, and gives us sort of security guarantees that Dapper will have an evolution independent of any one company. So that's very important. Then, of course, being a part of the incubation project, CNCF provides enormous numbers of resources to help that project grow. It helps our project with evangelism, marketing, and just monetary resources around those things. So it gives it great support and allows it to be grow inside the different communities. So this was always a goal of the project, that we want to see Dapper become sort of an industry standard set of APIs that, in the same way that you could look at Kubernetes has become this sort of de facto platform for anyone to be able to run and build their cloud native applications as a hosting platform. What is the de facto set of APIs that developers will start to use, that they can use to stitch together a lot of these existing cloud native technologies, including the use of gRPC and cloud events and SPIFFE and many of the other CNCF adopted technologies together. And Dapper integrates with those technologies very well. So we see it as bringing a developer ecosystem strongly into CNCF, and bringing a sort of APIs that we believe will become a standard set that will be used inside the industry.
It's compute, right? Kubernetes is the new compute, and this is CNCF kind of owns the stack, if you will. And I say own, not the traditional sense of own, but these tools. Wanted to talk a little bit about, what, we're actually running low on time. Let's make sure we hit a few things. For people who want to find out more about Dapper, where do they go?
Yeah, the best place they can go to is they can start at dapper.io. That's dapr.io. And that just gives you sort of a landing page that gives you an overview. And from there, you can move off into the docs repo and read more about what Dapper does. And I fully encourage you to go off and then start at that point and go to sort of the getting started guide. You can install Dapper very simply with a CLI and go through all of that. So dapper.io is the place to go and start.
Absolutely. And that's where I'd encourage you, if you're interested in Dapper, go check it out at dapr.io. Mark, I guess this means we'll be seeing the Dapper folks at maybe KubeCon, CNCF, Cloud Native Con. What's the next one? Valencia in Spain, right?
Yes, I'd love to hope that. Just this last month in October, we actually launched and had a Dappercon ourselves, which was open to driven by the community. So inspired by the likes of KubeCon and things like this, we actually had a Dappercon. So go off to you'll find a link on our YouTube channel. If you go and look at that, you'll see that we had a whole day of talks from the community itself, from companies like Legentic, from Man Group, from Zeiss, who talked all about their experiences of using Dapper and what it was like. So go check that out. And I'm hoping that Dappercon goes forward next year and becomes part of KubeCon, because inside KubeCon you get a lot of the other broader attention from the rest of the ecosystem around these things. So yes, I'm really, really excited about that happening for next year.
Cool, man. Hey, Mark, thanks for spending some time with us here on Techstrong TV. You know what? Kudos to you and congratulations. It's not easy giving birth, right? As any woman can testify to. Sometimes we men, we don't get that. But it's not easy. It's not easy, bringing a project to this point. And, from here, it's onward and upward, though, too. It's a great project. I think our audience appreciates it. Appreciate your hard work on it. Keep us posted.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. And thank you for having a chance to talk about Dapper. And yes, you're right. It was hard giving birth. And here we are. And it's an exciting day.
Absolutely. Mark Fussell, he's from Microsoft, but one of the co-creators of Dapper, a newly incubated project over at CNCF. Check it out. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, Alan speaks with Mark Lambert, who is the VP of Product Marketing at Applet Tools, and Torsten Volk, who is the Senior Analyst over at EMA Research. And the three of them discuss a new survey that's out, or a report called Disrupting the Economics of Software Testing Through AI. And they discuss some of the critical factors that hinder software engineering and DevOps teams, including the escalating costs of quality control with growing complexity associated with increasing release velocity, the number of smart devices, operating systems, and programming languages. A lot is in this report, and they cover some really great points. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another segment here on Techstrong TV. I am really happy to introduce our guest for this next segment. First of all, he's a returning guest with us. He's from our friends at Applet Tools. It's Mark Lambert. Hey, Mark, how are you, man?
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Great to have you, for you to have me on. Yeah, great to talk to you.
Absolutely. And then joining Mark and I today is Torsten Volk. Torsten is... I just drew a blank. EMA, right? Enterprise Management Associates?
Exactly.
Yep. And we were talking off camera. Torsten is actually a friend of our friend Andy Mann, who he knew or was his predecessor at EMA 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And Torsten, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's awesome to be here.
Thank you. So, guys, look, Applet Tools, leader in visual testing. We've had, beyond Mark, we've had many Applet Tools people on over the last almost 2 years now of doing Techstrong TV. So I think our audience is familiar, but just in case people aren't, Mark, how about a little quick Applet Tools backgrounder?
Sure. Yeah. So Applet Tools is known for inventing visual AI. So helping software development teams accelerate their releases by mimicking the human eye and brain and how we as humans analyze computer screens, highlighting differences and issues within your UI so you can do not only visual testing, but also fundamentally change and modernize your functional test automation. So it's really the glue that plugs right into your existing practices. So Selenium, Cypress, we support over 50 SDKs. There's a free account as well, so you can get in there and get going and kind of feel the water, so to speak. But what we're seeing is that it's helping leading brands accelerate their digital experiences, and really it ties directly into the research, obviously, that Torsten's been doing around AI and how that can help organizations disrupt the economics of software testing.
Love it. And Torsten, look, I know EMA from before 2010 even, but for those folks who maybe, a lot of our audience are technical people, they may not necessarily follow the analyst beat. Why don't you give them a little EMA background?
My boss describes it always as the industry analyst firm for enterprise-grade solutions. And in the beginning, I've been here for a while. In the beginning, I was always a little bit wondering, what does that really mean? And what it, at the end of the day, means is we have all of those emerging technologies coming up, especially in the area of artificial intelligence and cloud-native applications and intelligent automation. And what we are looking at is really how can we leverage those capabilities within an enterprise setting. So once the dust has settled and we've all gorged ourselves, by consuming the leading edge of all of those tools, the question then is, how do I expand that footprint of those tools across the enterprise so that the enterprise as a whole is more competitive in the end? So basically projecting those constraints of all of those cool new products and technologies into the enterprise. That is really what EMA is all about. And my specific practice is focused, as you can see in the background here, that's one of my research graphics, is focused on looking at machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning, and how those capabilities can enhance the enterprise.
I get it. Great use of the background, Torsten. Thank you. All right. So, Mark, we've got all that out of the way. Let's jump into what we really want to talk on today, and I'm going to let you kick it off if it's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So recent report from EMA, as Tos is the author, and I'll kind of throw the ball to him very quickly, obviously, but really talking about how artificial intelligence and machine learning is revolutionizing the software testing space. And it's really important right now because there's so much buzz around AI, machine learning, and kind of where it comes in. You want to understand, where does the rubber meet the road? What is impactful today? What's impactful for the future? And then what's, where the drivers are that are getting us there. So, Torsten, I'll turn over to you and maybe kind of like talk about some of the capabilities that you talk about in the report and kind of like the challenges that you've seen that come into play.
We started that report by looking at the key pain points, like we start almost all of our reports, right? What is not sustainable anymore in a specific discipline? And in this case, it's test engineering. And we have pressure factors. One of them is that the business needs us to release software a lot more often and in a really granular manner, where somebody is asking for a feature capability and the software development team is expected to release that thing very quickly, ideally in an ongoing manner. So that is one part. And the second part is that the end users are have become very much more diverse than they even were in the recent past, where we have multiple charts where we show the escalation of the number of devices with different screens, different processors, different network connection, different interfaces for your fingers or for voice control. And all of those things make testing much, much more difficult. And one of my favorite parts always is the little war stories that you get told, right? So in the beginning, when we look at all the material that we have, we talk to a lot of developers and test engineers and DevOps guys. And my war stories, or their war stories, always started with, oh yeah, regression testing, Torsten, that is really not doable anymore. This is kind of a dreamland that you're living in as an analyst. If you think that we can regression test all of those releases, it's just too much. And it would take forever to be able to do that. So if we can't regression test, we are running a significant risk, Mark, that that something goes awry, right? We always are sure that in theory things should work, but in real life there are combinations of technologies or of code functions that they then don't work, and that's where we start with artificial intelligence and this whole pair of eyes, Mark, that you are describing, right? Where you say, oh yeah, my test engineers don't have to be that pair of eyes that check through dozens of boxes and just say yes everywhere, and then also overlook something. So, but that pair of eyes is something more. It's something that has a certain degree of, if I now say understanding, I think I'm going to embarrass myself, but it has a certain degree of ability to comprehend, maybe it's the same word, but to pick up things of a similar character and to categorize and cluster things in a manner that makes sense for human beings then to review, Mark, right? And that is where a tool like Applitools is very interesting and also unique in the marketplace, right? Where it's a pair of eyes that you guys are building.
Yeah, and I think that talks directly. I mean, your research touches on several different areas where AI comes in, and visual inspection, which is obviously where Applitools fits, is really a highly impactful and the most impactful today of those techniques, because it does so many different things. So first of all, obviously, there's the streamlining of the manual review effort, right? So I've got this explosion of devices. How do I check them all? Well, because of the high level of accuracy of Applitools Visual AI, and it's been trained on over 1 billion images, and it's got 4 nines of accuracy. So what that means is, as a human, I don't have to review tens or hundreds of screenshots. I'm just focused in on a very small subset. But that's just the first part of it, because then you layer on top of that and this explosion of release velocity, increasing device combinations, and as well as the complexity of the application and so many things out of your control. You need help in reviewing the volumes of data and really saying, okay, all of these things kind of look like the same. So, and then bringing them together. I talk about it basically sorting your visual review into different stacks of paper. So, for example, I might have 76 screens that have a visual defect, but I can break those down into 2 categories of 40 and 36. And those types of techniques go beyond just the basic pixel diffing approach, which is the one that would be a traditional visual testing technology. And really, the ability to categorize that you talk about, Torsten, is the key driver or the key foundation that all of these things get built on top of. So it's a really powerful technique, and as I said earlier, plugs right into existing, so you don't have to rip and replace. That's one of the things that a lot of AI technology today is say, okay, it's great, but you have to build it all new in this track. The thing that is really powerful with Applitools is we plug right in to your existing frameworks, open source as well as third-party commercial tools, and then we elevate the process with the dashboard to really enable cross-team collaboration. So it's not just your testers or your test automation or developers that are engaged, your domain experts, even other parts of the team like UI UX design, for example, get to be involved in that collaboration process.
Yes, and we see often that communication is key, and it's not happening in testing, where we have those more and more decentralized product teams that are doing their own thing with their own toolkits and pipelines, but they're not really benefiting from what other teams are finding. And so coming back to that horrible list approach, right, where you have, you check those boxes or you don't check them, right? So it's a very monotonous affair as a human being to review this. But then once you've reviewed it, usually it comes back to you again and again, and then it comes back and hits other people in that organization, because there is no communication and there's no unified platform to retain that knowledge, right? And with reinforcement learning, you can teach the system what it needs to come back to a human with and what it shouldn't. So if one team makes decisions, all the other teams are benefiting from that, and there is less and less of this toil type of task where you just also as a human tend to make mistakes, and it's just not scalable, right? So that whole scalability aspect is an interesting one that deep learning and reinforcement learning brings us there, Mark.
Yeah, you hit on the key things, right? It's you scaling to meet the current demands of release velocity, shorter release cycles. But the other thing I always think about when I think about AI and machine learning and how it can help us from a software quality perspective, it's an assistive technology. So you're reducing or removing mundane and repetitive tasks, which in themselves are error prone. Humans are great at creative work. We're terrible at boring, monotonous things because we miss stuff. Whereas, leveraging AI and especially Applitools visual AI, it's highlighting those things. So, that same example I talked about, 76 screens, you're going to miss stuff. If you're looking at them all and you're like, it's the same, it's the same, it's the same. But the visual AI will identify key differences between the 76 images to really kind of like focus and improve the efforts.
Yeah, and that gets even when you look a little bit into the future, Mark. I know you can't share roadmap items, but that whole idea of having a visual AI can go even beyond just user interface testing, right? Where you can do sanity checks in certain areas where you say, that number can never be 1 billion because of what I know about the data in the background, right? And a lot of the things that come through that we continuously see coming through when you release, and then you don't want to be the one in the test team to hold back a release in the middle of the night. It's funny that when I was young and had a ton of hair still, that was what happened. And it's still happening today, just as much, right? Where people think, oh, no, I shouldn't be the one who says that. I think it's all fine. Let's sign off on that, right? So the release gates are kind of getting mushier and mushier in those areas, and that ability to say, oh yeah, I had somebody look over it, and if something horrible had happened, right, some compliance violation or some crazy numbers in the shopping cart that can never add up, right, can be even simple things where it's, this costs $1 billion, right, or it's euros instead of dollars, but we are in a certain country. Those are things that you can catch more and more.
Fair. Guys, I feel like I didn't get much of any words in here, but it's okay. I would, but I try to be a good host to let the guests talk, and you guys had it, right? This is something, Torsten, you're obviously very, very passionate and involved in, and Mark, it's your life, right? And so I let it go. However, we are just about out of time, believe it or not. And, we went on here for 15 plus minutes on this.
Can I just let people know where they can get the report?
That's what I was going to ask you.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so go to applitools.com/EMA, and you'll be able to download the full report and access all the information there. So thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mark. So it's applitools.com/EMA, which also happens to be where Torsten works at EMA, Enterprise Management Associates. Guys, it sounds like it was a really worthwhile research project here with some really good results and really good findings and insights. Look, there's a reason Applitools has been as successful as it has, right? The whole idea of AI and testing is like peanut butter and chocolate in some way, and we barely scratched the surface in a lot of ways, right? There's so much more yet to be done, and looking forward to hearing more about it in the future.
Yep.
All righty.
Thank you, Alan. Look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.
All righty. Excellent. Torsten Vogt, EMA. Of course, Mark Lambert from Applitools here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind Devops.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got Devops Unbound, one of our regular series here on Techstrong TV. In this one, Alan is the host along with Mitchell Ashley, and they are joined by Gary Groover of Groover Consulting, William Barry from Tricentis, and Tracy Bannon from MITRE. And they are going to be introducing some best practices for a successful DevOps transformation. They'll also talk about some of the challenges and cultural changes that come with it. So they are going to offer some of their insight based on their experiences and offer up some best practices as well. This is a great conversation. If you are involved in a DevOps, digital transformation, DevOps transformation, anything like that, definitely want to check out this one, and it is a good one. So let's go ahead and get to it now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Devops Unbound. Devops Unbound is a bi-weekly video series featuring relevant topics in DevOps. We go wherever we think DevOps is going and what we need to shine a light on. Devops Unbound is sponsored by our good friends at Tricentis, and we thank them for their sponsorship. In addition to the bi-weekly Devops Unbound show, of which you're going to watch one right now, hopefully. Every month or so, we also do a DevOps live roundtable with an expanded panel that's live and open to the general public for questions as well. This episode, of course, is a recorded one, not a live roundtable. But if you go to Devops Unbound or on Devops.com, you can see the schedule if you'd like to perhaps attend a live roundtable in the future. But with that out of the way, let me jump into this episode's topic. Leading a DevOps transformations, lessons learned, and I couldn't think of a better panel to have us do this. You know, for me, leading a DevOps transformation has always been kind of synonymous with my friend Gary Groover, who wrote a book, Leading the Transformation, which early on in Devops.com, when we first launched, was a big staple of what we were preaching then. Gary, welcome to Devops Unbound. Maybe a little introduction about you, your company, and your background.
Hi, Alan. Great to be here. I'm Gary Groover. I've led several large transformations. Probably the one you've heard of most is the one at HP, where we transformed and got a 2 to 3x improvement in productivity. I've written 4 books in this space, and I spend my time now trying to do everything I possibly can to help organizations transform how they do software development, because it had such an impact on me and the businesses that I was part of.
Fantastic. Okay. Next is a woman who is also no stranger to DevOps transformations herself. A lot of them in the government and government contractor world, where she lives a lot now. It's Tracy Bannon. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, hi there. Thank you for the invite. My background is as a software architect and engineer, so I've been living DevOps for a long time because I needed to get software into the hands of the end users, and I needed to do it efficiently. Part of that required us to get that transformational thinking going. So I do spend time, like Gary does, in the middle of my client and my sponsors' spaces, helping them to understand, right, really talking straight with them about the differences that the different thought mental model that they have to bring forward, because it's not easy, but I know we're going to get into that today. Really excited. I work currently with the MITRE Corporation. They're federally funded research and development. What that means is that I don't compete with industry. Congress chartered us specifically to provide that expert leadership to the government to help them move in the right direction. So a little bit different perspective. Really happy to be here.
Thank you, JC. Last but not least, is William Berry. Hey, William, welcome to Devops Unbound, and maybe a little introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alan. It's great to be here and great to be here with this panel. So I'm Will Berry. I lead our business engagement at Trisynthus. I help our customers with aligning our initiatives or their initiatives to continuous testing so that they're able to de-risk that aspect of delivery, be able to make those timeframes, deliver faster, and being able to achieve those goals that they have set forth.
Great, and thank you for joining us. So guys, the topic's Devops Transformation. When I first started Devops.com, I was excited to see all these companies undergoing DevOps transformation. And I really relished talking to as many practitioners, representatives of organizations as I could, to see patterns, to see, what was emerging as what was the best way to do this, right? Because it there was the cultural aspect and the tools and the people and the processes, right? But what was the best way to bring it together? And also remember, when I started Devops.com, there was this silly argument of whether DevOps was something just for startups and Silicon Valley unicorns, or as Gene Kim would say, was it just for horses as well, right? The enterprise. Were large enterprises able to adopt a DevOps kind of mindset? And there were like, believe it or not, Gary, I'm sure you remember this, there were fights raging, on the Twitter sphere and the blogosphere about, was DevOps an enterprise thing? To me, I always thought so. And then consensus was, yeah, of course. Stage 2 was, okay, so all these companies started saying, okay, we're going to do a DevOps transformation. And you know what? A lot of them didn't get the results they were expecting. And there was this loser tag. This DevOps stuff don't work. So, Gary, I'm going to ask you to kick it off. I've given a little historical perspective. Do you think I'm crazy? Is that what you saw, or what? No, but
the debate that I've had with Gene over years is, if you've got a large system of people that need to work together, the things that you're going to do are different than you do it with a small team.
Exactly.
And a lot of the debate that I get in with Gene is Gene saying, no, this is how the small teams do it. So now we need to make the large teams do it like the small teams do it. And that just doesn't work. And fundamentally, I think that's why a lot of DevOps things struggled and failed.
But small companies don't necessarily succeed either, because so first of all, it's not about doing DevOps. Alan, you've heard me say this before. I get so peeved when people say, we need to do DevOps. They'll bring me in and say, help us. We need to do DevOps. We need to start to transform so we can do DevOps. And I'll push back and I'll say, why? What exactly are you trying to accomplish? Right? Let's get back to brass tacks. Let's have a reason that we're doing something, and then we'll track towards it. We'll adopt the principles that are appropriate for you. But I've seen small organizations fail because it is pursuant to your context. And I think that's where you're going, Gary. You got to know the context of that organization. You got to understand what its business objectives are, its engineering objectives are, and its people. And then you figure out which pattern might apply to them, because it's not going to be, there's no lather, rinse, repeat recipe. There's not a singular playbook for this. And that, unfortunately, is what everybody's looking for. They're looking for that playbook. I need the checklist, what I need to do. Can you give me a book? Because I'll just follow that.
Tracy, I've seen many an organization where they will spin off a group, sort of a skunkwork project, like back in the 40s and 50s, right? Kelly with the X1 and things. And those can work. They can work as a start, but oftentimes they become a thing themselves, and then they hit the corporate, the white corpuscles, right, that come out and attack the foreign object. So I think it's all in the context of the organization. Mm-hmm. If you're savvy about what makes an organization tick, we're all about data. We're all about measurement. We're all about whatever it is, finance, whatever it might be. And know how they adopt change or don't. You've got to sort of build in the psychology of, okay, great. How do things get adopted here? How do people get on board? And it's never easy, but it can be a lot harder if you sort of walk in with the bright, shiny knight and sword, and we're the new savior of the day, and poof, you're the first one to get skewered and taken out to the back.
Yeah, and Mitch, I think you hit it. I mean, it's an organizational mindset, and you can kind of see it today. I mean, you can see the responsiveness of what companies do in a market and what their competitors do. And you can see who has that mindset and who doesn't based on whether or not, if I release like a new phone type strategy, can T-Mobile respond? Can AT&T respond? And who responds the quickest to be able to address that attack?
I was having a conversation yesterday with a fellow by the name of Stephen Spear. He's a professor at MIT Sloan. He's done a lot of, had a lot of really good thought leadership. Well. And we were talking about the cultural overlay and how that makes a difference, because we keep looking for that recipe. We keep not understanding what the culture is. Now, I don't push for culture change. I never push for culture change, because if you came into my house and said, you need to change your culture, the first thing I'm going to do is put my hand up and say, no, I don't. But I am into culture building and culture understanding, because we build a culture together. So the cultural part means a lot. And I'll go back to what Mitch said about context, understanding the context, the cultural context of that organization. When you think about government, specifically, that's where I'm living a lot right now, especially on the DoD side of the house. They are in a zero defect, like low risk tolerance, right? They need to make sure that it's right the first time. Well, that adds another level of complexity to the mix. So yeah, I want to go fast, but how fast is appropriate? I want to adopt these principles, and how many of those principles do I apply that allow me to get there in a cyber secure, safe way, right? How do I make sure the missile hits the target? How do I make sure that the plane is flying the right way? No, I mean, William, you brought up about the continuous testing and what Tricentis does in that realm. It's interesting that the transformation has to include testing in a way that it hasn't done. And it's not just that automated unit test, but just automate the unit test and we'll be fine. Get some high code coverage. Hey, hit 90% code coverage. It's not that, right? There's a bigger, broader set of this. And I want to bring myself back though. Something that y'all said earlier is that it matters, understanding the context of the organization matters. But where do you start? So if you're walking in the very first time to meet somebody new, Gary, how do you approach counseling? I'll use that term, counseling a new organization that you're meeting, whether they've been in a government space, whether they are international, whether they are a small US startup. Where do you start with that exchange of knowledge to figure out how to help them?
I tend to start by trying to understand what their problem is and trying to figure out what they're doing. If I can get the leaders to engage, not just in empowering the team and getting out of the way, but really trying to take the time to understand how their current processes work and work with them to try to figure out how to make the waste in their current processes visible, and then spend the time to let them pick the ideas that they think will help the most. I don't ever go in and do DevOps. I think that's it's the most disservice we've done to the industry. If you went to, it's kind of like trying the automobile industry trying to copy Toyota in the 80s. Eventually they figured out that wasn't working and it was stupid. Mm-hmm. The software industry stuck trying to copy what worked for other people instead of trying to create a culture of continuous improvement and letting the organization pick the ideas that they will champion, the ideas that they'll embrace, and the ideas that they'll invest in making those improvements. And if we can't get the leaders to do that, you're never going to see the organization transform.
So let me comment on that. you can't change human nature. And there are certain, in the technology industry, we emulate success. We emulate, if you succeed, right? How many business plans did we see 7, 8, 9 years ago that said, I want to be the Uber of, right? I want to be the Uber of testing. I want to be the Uber of name a business model, because what Uber did, I want to be the Uber of. I want to be the Twitter of, right? In the technology industry, this is what VCs whip out their checkbooks for, right? And so you're going to get that. I don't know how you avoid that.
But if you go into one of Tracy's clients that's developing a missile launch type system, and you go, let me tell you what Netflix did and how they made it work and how they had these teams, that they are going to check out. No,
yeah,
they're
we don't
go
want to be
beyond checking out. They're going to dig their heels in so hard that they're going to shoot down any idea that you ever had, and you're never going to make a bit of progress.
You become the next missile target, I think.
Well, hold on. It's actually in between. So there are. So Gary's right that depending on the audience, some of them they'll get ashen, they'll look down, and then they'll put their hand up and they'll say, go away. But there is a growing body of folks, right, that have come into this. They've grown up as those developers. They've been hitting up against this, and they are now becoming those leaders. So there is an amazing undercurrent that's out there, and I'm getting to work with them firsthand. They are looking for that air cover, so to speak, right? They're looking for those they want to go the whole way up to the Pentagon. They want to go to Congress. They want people weighing in. And here's where it tracks back to the problem that you talked about, Alan. We're not talking straight, and we're not getting the messages out that it's not about copycatting, but it's about learning from. If we go into it and say, I don't want to use the Netflix model, I don't want to use the Uber model, I want to look at it and I want to be informed by it, and I want to juxtapose it against my unique context, that's where we help to get real success, incremental improvement. But we also have to come back to, learning fast, failing small, failing cheap is okay. That's a mindset shift, regardless as to the industry. We always say fail fast, but people react to that. So say learn fast, but fail small. And if you can start to fail small and surface it, allow it to be seen, allow there to be transparency into the failure, discuss it openly, that, in my mind and in my observation, that's actually transformational in nature, because people start to look at that and glom onto it. Now, Mitch, you mentioned something, which is when you spin off this group and you say, okay, you guys go be that new DevOps group. Can you guys go establish how DevOps work? And you guys be a pilot project. The problem is when they succeed and they come back and try to scale it, well, they've been partitioned off as though they're a .com, right? They're over here. They do this amazingness. And what they did isn't necessarily scalable as is. And there's another failure point that happens, because now you're in an organization, an enterprise that's got a unicorn team that did great things. How do I scale that? Well, I don't just pick it up and copy it. Now I have to look at how information flows, how I go about teamification when I have lots of different folks coming from different consultancies and contractors. Not all software is written by developers and by organizational resources that are owned by one company. It's actually getting to be kind of rare.
So that's it. That's what I see is the biggest challenge a lot of times when it comes to speed is the management layer is ready for it. The management teams, they want to be able to do it, but the executive layer still operates in a very, project-based, initiative-based thought process. And so like you see this, like this was supposed to play into this larger role of how I roll out, DevOps across my enterprise. So I went to this team and I did this, but it was still in this big initiative picture. It wasn't allowing teams to fail fast. It wasn't creating that environment where these managers can really dive into what they know and figure it out and drive it, and then have somebody else consolidate all that at the same time at that larger level. We're still very much, when we sit in a boardroom, we talk years and we talk plans and we execute against it in that manner. We don't always necessarily break it down into these tidbits that we need to be able to empower our managers with.
And it's a big bang transformation. And I've spent a lot more time recently looking at organizational change management, and they say one of the biggest barriers to people adopting new ways of doing things is risk. Any risk. And when you do these big bang transformation, there's huge risk, and that's a barrier. If you do a bunch of incremental, large, small changes and you create a culture of continuous improvement, that's a smaller risk. It's reversible. It's kind of like Tracy says, you can fail or learn quick, and you can adjust and you can learn along the way. And I think what we're missing is, we're trying to tell people what to do. And I've done this whole shift to teaching people the principles and the approaches and making their process visible, letting them pick things that they'll champion and they'll make work, and doing it in small incremental bits that they'll get excited and they can reverse and they can learn and adjust. And it seems to be getting a lot more success in terms of teaching people how to analyze their processes and letting them pick instead of telling them what to do and seeing them resist the changes.
Gary, I think we have made this repeated mistake over and over. Every time we introduce a change, it's about telling people that they're wrong and what they've been doing is wrong and it's bad. And people have learned, through some hard knocks of the folks that come in and do that, they come and go, right? The last person that did that got fired, right? Because they ran up against this or their project failed or whatever. And so it's more about let's take the things that we do really well and let's figure out how to do those even better. And as you were talking about, let's find the places where, we're either creating a waste or there's a bottleneck there, or, give people a common problem to work on, not a common enemy, the change agent. You're the person with the arrows in your back, right? You're running away from the last change project. But I think that's and it's always the shiny object, right? The next great thing that's going to solve all our problems. So if we just went all to cloud native, if we just all went to DevOps, if we just all went to Agile, it's never that simple. It's how do we take the ideas that this has and adopt it in our way, in our style, and to match what our objectives are. Because as soon as you create competing objectives, like the Skunkworks team is this to show everybody they're wrong and this is the right way to do it. Well, poof, you failed already before you even get out of the gate.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a misnomer in the term DevOps, because as soon as we say dev, we lean towards developers and we think, oh, it's a coding initiative. But really in business, we're all capable of developing something, whether we're developing a strategy or initiative or some way that we're going to take our business to market. You're doing something that would create a change in your organization. So then it's about, how do I make sure that that change is quality, and how do I measure the impact of that change? And so that I can know that I fail fast, because that's what I see is that we sometimes get too far into, well, it's more about the initiative and not about the measures. And we have to have them both together. And we have to have this be a mentality that everybody is developing something for the organization.
There's so much fodder with what you just said. I was jotting down a couple of different things. I wish I loved the term DevOps anymore. I don't anymore, because it's another label. It's an overloaded term. You're right that we are hyper focused on dev. We leave the ops out of this. Yes, I know we're focusing on SRE and we're getting smart about ops, but we put so much pressure on the developers to go fast, right? That's what people say. Developers have to go faster. And we've been so hyper focused on enabling that to happen. And that doesn't help transformation. And so then we say, well, what we'll do is we'll give you a maturity model. And if you have a maturity model, then you can just figure out, how DevOpsable you are. How DevOpsy are you? Because I've got a maturity model. So hater on the models. I do agree that it's great to have a metric or a measurement that matters as long as you know how to change it, right? You know what it means and you don't weaponize it. A buddy of mine, Brian Finster, a lot of you guys know him, he'll talk about the weaponizing of metrics. But I want to come back to something that y'all said about not trying to change a culture, but rather helping them to grow that culture, but teaching them. one of the things that I'm running into is, depending on the organization, the individuals have muscle memory, and I'm talking incredible muscle memory. So I'm finding that if I have that same pod and I don't insert some additional change agents, just mix up the group a little bit, I can't get the change that I want. And there have been some interesting studies about exactly that in the organizational change management area. If you have a group of 10 people and you say, okay, guys, suddenly we're all going to start behaving differently because somebody has come in and they've given us help and they've given us some guidance. What's the likelihood that that 9 or 10 person group suddenly manifests without amazing amount of coaching and rigor and over the shoulder help? But imagine, or maybe you've been in that position where somebody new joins, and they have an energy and they have a different perspective and they have a diverse way of coming at it. Well, then transformation starts. It's no different than a blended family. A family unit as it is, you bring somebody new in, somebody marries in, and they have a different way of cooking. They have a different way of talking. They have a different way of doing something. And suddenly it's catching on and it's becoming part of the fabric of that family. I see DevOps transformation as kind of putting some additional spice in. We've got to have the scaffolding around it. We have to have that education that's out there, but we've got to have those catalysts, those humans that bring that energy to help propagate and to help the people around them. The developer who really gets it, that quality engineer who's really excited about things, the leader, right, who is out there able to fail publicly about something that they've done and really foot stomp when their team fails about how great it was that they're moving forward quickly to resolve that. So, Gary, I'd be interested in your thoughts on, especially on, I saw you grimace when I said maturity model. Interested to see what your thoughts are about measuring transformation. How do we start to measure transformation?
So I've gotten to the point where I'm like you. I've quit using the word DevOps. It's not that the principles don't work and they're ineffective, but it's so balled up in a wrapped up image that I think in a lot of cases it's not doing almost more harm than good. Mm-hmm. Two, I've gotten to the point where I don't want to measure whether a team's doing DevOps, and I don't want to do this because that assumes everybody's going on the same path. What I've tried to do is we're trying to make organizations more productive and more effective, and we're trying to get them to improve on a continuous basis. And we can't really measure throughput and some of the different things, but what I think I've gotten really good at doing is measuring the waste that slows down organizations. And so we make the waste visible. We teach people how to make their process visible, how to make the waste visible, and then we give them key metrics that show when I made this change, I removed this waste and inefficiencies. And as much as I fought the certification thing, I'm finally on board because I tried to emulate what was done in the manufacturing, where you've got a white belt where you get a basic knowledge, but to get a green belt or black belt, you've got to do an improvement project. Mm-hmm. And in that improvement project, what I'm trying to do is motivate people to make a change, make an improvement. And when you do that, I'm trying to quantify the waste that they've removed from the organizations. And most of the improvements that I've seen so far, they're removing like $50,000, $60,000 of annual waste a year in an improvement project. And they're able to go to the company in the organization and say, look at the waste that I removed. Can I go do another one? And people are going, yeah, let's go do another one. That made sense. Let's go do some more of those. And we're creating that culture of little changes one by one. Yep. And if I can get the executives to engage, the magnitude of the improvements that they're going after are just orders of magnitude higher because they're in a position to have a higher impact on the organization just because of where they sit and how they work across teams.
The surfacing of waste is so important. One of the Air Force groups that I'm working with, massive PMO, or should I say massive joint? It's actually a JPO, a joint PMO with 6 massive PMOs underneath it. And we strategically went through and we did, I call it rapid value streaming. It's not Lean Six Sigma official value stream mapping, but it was getting together and we had to be remote, but using Mural and talking through their processes at a very high level just to surface it. It was about 2 90-minute sessions, just enough that people were like, look at that, and allowing their own stories to hit them in the face in a very open and engaging way. So we didn't want to indict anybody, but it was having them tell that story together. And it was surprising, just that 3 hours, how much that meant. And we did that with each one of these PMOs, how much they learned from that to help them directionally. Now, there's a lot of other massive challenges with acquisition and policy and other things that they have to deal with. But your point of identify where the waste was, seeing something go into an inbox as an attachment, a Word doc attachment, and knowing that it was sitting there for 18 to 25 days because there weren't enough humans to even look in the inbox. Those are some of the things that you don't even think about as impacting a value stream or the delivery of flow. There's so many amazing twists and turns that you get into with that. Gary, do you, and I guess I should ask everybody, when you're looking to identify waste, what are some of the techniques that you're using to identify waste?
I tend to map the deployment pipeline, and some people would call it value stream mapping, but value stream mapping assumes you're doing one thing at a time. But in software, when you get into the build release process, you're doing it as a group.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's a lot of errors that a lot of people make when they value stream map that don't highlight the types of things that slow software organizations down. So I do value stream mapping kind of, but I map the deployment pipeline, and I kind of put some metrics on the requirements process, and I use that to make it visible. And if you can do what you did and get the executives to take the time to understand their processes and make it visible, you're like orders of magnitude ahead of anybody else who's going to do this type of stuff. To me, it's so important that, if I've got a company that's willing to do a prototype and they can get the executives to sit down and go through my training, I'll give them the white belt training away just so that they can get aligned and see it. I had an organization come in the other day that Brian Finster sent me to them, and they came up and they sort of said, we're thinking about surveying our culture and doing a cultural survey as the start of our DevOps. And it's like, what do you want to do? And I finally stopped and I said, here, take this free training and go off and do it. And they had 3 executives go off and do it. And they came back together and said, I can't believe how well it aligned our thinking. We had this disconnect and we were all seeing it from our own specific view. And as we took this training, it aligned our thinking. If you can get the executives to do that, I think you're going to be, the probability of success for seeing results is going to be orders of magnitude higher. And, I'm at this point in the career where, I do it for a living, but I'm trying to help as many people as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. And I worked with David Farley to help with the technical side. And we're trying to figure out how do we, now that we're at this point in our career, if we can digitize our knowledge, we can help a lot more people. We can help them more cheaply, and they can go off and do these things. And then they can do it for themselves. And if they do it for themselves, they'll embrace their ideas and they'll make their ideas successful. So,
right. Teach a man to fish. Teach a man to fish.
I'm curious. Let me kind of throw a little wrinkle in this. This sounds like a very kind of well thought out, methodical process, and I think there are a lot of it is. What about organizations that are under great threat? We have a lot of companies who their supply chain is a total mess, right? And they're scrambling to get new suppliers in place, new transportation. If you're on that part of it, there's a lot of organizations who are dealing with either market threats, just even operational threats. And so they can't go back and let's look at the next piece of waste, or maybe that is a method. I was
going to say, I think we're talking about exactly the same thing.
What do you do that when what's hitting the wall and you got to make something happen right now? At least that's what management's going to come to you and say, we may not have jobs tomorrow. Go fix this.
Yeah, I think it goes to what Gary's saying. Look at your release pipeline, and what I see a lot of is this idea of what I call an avocado release, which is you have all these people do this work, and then it gets to this decision about whether you go or no go. And people hold on to it like an avocado. They're like, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? Oh, it went bad. We got to get it out there. And you don't have this confidence in your organization. And that's where a lot of this waste comes in, to make that decision, to have that go, no go be, something that's almost automated, to a sense of, here's the report, here's the impact, make the decision and move. And that's where these companies are struggling from a supply chain perspective. If I'm going to hire a new vendor and I have to get 10, 12 sign-offs and it takes 2 months, those transportation vendors are in high demand right now. So by the time I get my signatures on paper, they might be gone.
They're gone. They're busy, right?
But at the end of the day, doesn't it all track back to identifying what your set of whys are? You've got an imperative, you've got to solve it. It's not going to be lather, rinse, repeat for everybody. If you have a supply chain issue, a software supply chain or firm goods, it doesn't matter. If that is your issue and your challenge, then you're going to gaze at that and you're going to turn at it fast and you're going to say, what's the waste, right? To Gary's point, looking at that, it might not be a DevOps pipeline, but if I'm looking at how fast it takes to get information into me, how fast does it take for us to sign that up? We're going to apply the same type of thinking, Mitch. So I don't see that imperative as being any different than the software is failing in production or I can't get a new user onto it. It's another risk or challenge, and it gets prioritized at the top of the list, and all eyes are on that to solve it together. Gary, something that you and William both said really resonates with me, and it comes back to that education piece. I'm at that same point where my goal is to share experience stories, get the information out there so that people are educated, because it's when the taxonomy is not shared, when we don't have a common lexicon. I mean, why do certifications matter? Well, the reason the certifications matter often is so we're speaking the same language. I mean, why sometimes will I look for particular certifications? Not that I know that the person can actually do the particular type of task coding, but at least I know they know the words. I mean, and there, I think that there's merit in us thinking about getting to those lexicons, common lexicons that what is DevOps? Oh, I'm not even getting down that path. But if we can, in our own sphere of influence, get to some more common terminology, augment that with the right types of education so that people can consume this and they can get on a level playing field, we're going to see continued growth and transformation. And that's at the end of the day, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I'm going to go back to a little bit what Mitch said. I think the habit that the executives get into is I've got this burning fire and I'm just going to beat up the teams and I'm going to beat the teams until they work harder. And I had a group of executives go through this training, and the senior vice president stepped back and said, I had no idea of what people were dealing with on a day-to-day basis was getting in their way of delivering. And if they don't have any idea of what's getting in the way of the organization delivering, they're going to continue to focus in on, we got to put this fire out, we got to put this fire out, we got to put this. And so a big part is getting them to step back and get visibility of the things that are slowing them down. And if they're driving the dev team like crazy to continue to create more stuff, and they're doing manual testing, they've got an unsustainable process. Because, dev writes 100 lines of code and test has to test 100 lines of code. That's iteration 1. Iteration 2, you got 100 more lines of code, and then QA has to test 200 lines of code. Right? It just doesn't work. Right? You've got to get past that. But if they don't see that and they don't have appreciation for what the teams are going through and what's slowing the organization down, they're going to do nothing but what you said, Mitch, which was beat on what the business is beating on them to get delivered. And the key is, how do we get these executives to slow down and take the time to understand what's getting in the way of getting what they really want?
There's nothing like a crisis to get people to rally around at times. Now, if it's manufactured crisis and it's the 52nd crisis this year of the week, that's only what you're describing too. I think one of the things that, whether it's a crisis or not, when you can rally people around a set of challenges, set of problems, we're really, our objective. Well, let me give you a real example. I've gone through two transformations, both involving cloud and DevOps. And they were both because there were conditions that changed, and what we were how we were shooting for wasn't the same target anymore. And one of them was we had moved to a much more cash sensitive company, changed the structure of the company. So we couldn't invest in hardware, et cetera. And so we said, okay, this isn't really 100% true, but let's pretend for a moment we don't have cash. We don't have money to go buy lots of hardware. And we want to figure out, could we leverage the cloud? And it wasn't a gun to our head, but it was a let's do that scenario and figure out what we do. Or we need to change how we're developing software, because while we have a monolith application, there's part of it that we really would like to be able to change more quickly and iterate on and do some new services around. So you can use, and sometimes it is a gun to your head, everybody's going to be working from home next Monday, so figure it out. But you can use those kind of rallying cries to say, okay, this is the problem we want to work on. What could we do?
Well, it's pushed by circumstance or pulled by a dream, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Carrot or stick, circumstance or dream. Tracking back to something that Gary said and Mitch that you brought up, the education part of this is important. There's a group of us that go across industry, government, academia, who have been meeting and talking about how do we very rapidly expose the leaders to a day in the life in their organization, because it's not going to be lather, rinse, repeat. And Gary, I know you have some really incredible training and education that are coming out that you've been working on with Dave. And I'm excited to see if that's something that I can leverage in this space. But that is becoming one of our rallying cries, is exposure. Simply walk a mile in the moccasins. They don't have to do hands-on all-day development, but I want them to see what it's like to get their priorities changed. You have a sprint, but now you're telling me that I have to change up everything that I'm doing. You're forcing me to go faster and faster, and you're only worried about my velocity and my burn down, and you're not thinking about sustainability. You're not thinking about the quality of you're not thinking about the fact that you want me to DevSecOps, and I'm a hobbyist. I haven't been trained as a cyber expert. I don't know secure coding standards. There's a lot that we're putting onto them, and we need to educate those leaders. A day in the life. I think a day in the life the other way might be helpful as well. So how do the developers, how do the design teams, how do folks who are delivering, how do they understand the stresses, the pressures, and the strategies that the leaders have to undertake? Because I think that there's both sides of it need a little bit of that cross understanding, but it is going to have to start with the leaders who are have the bigger stick and making sure that they understand.
So Tracy, I don't think it's just two sides. This was a technique. I forgot who I heard it from with people who do DevOps, consultations and consulting, which is have someone from the ops side spend a week as a dev. Have someone as a dev go over to the cyber team for a couple days, right? Have a leader do the manager's role, or have the leader do, a non-leader role. Have the single contributor do like empathy, right? It's one of the cornerstones of whether you want to call it DevOps or not. It's one of the cornerstones here was empathy. And I don't know if you could really empathize until you've walked a mile, as Tracy said, in those moccasins. And, I think it goes across all of these kind of, I don't want to use the word silos, but all these kinds of roles that we're talking about. Because I think you need empathy for respect, and you've got to respect what every single person, human, on that team does. I grabbed the last word because it's my prerogative. We're way over time, guys, but I didn't want to stop you. Shocking. Anyway, Tracy, Gary, William, thank you so much for being our guest panel on this Devops Unbound. We probably could have done 3 shows today and still not covered everything, but it was a great show. Mitchell, I'll give you the last word if you want to wrap it up, and we'll sign off.
Well, I just am in awe of the wisdom and the experience that everyone on the panel is bringing to this, and there's a lot of good lessons here. If I walked away with one nugget, it's stop for just a moment and think. Let's take in what we're doing and make sure we're focusing on the right things, or make sure that we're learning what we can do to work on the next set of right things. And I think that's, if I had to summarize in just a general way, I think that's a lot of what William, Gary, and Tracy have said today. So thank you all for that very much.
Okay, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another Devops Unbound episode. Until then, good luck, be well, thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes event. This presentation is by Karina Varela, who is the Principal Technical Marketing Manager over at Red Hat. Her presentation is titled Best Practices for Architecture and Delivery of Decision Logic in the Cloud Era, and she discusses some best practices and strategies for delivering automated decision logic in hybrid cloud environments. This is a great presentation. Let's roll it now.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here with you today. Are you ready to talk a little bit on how we can improve the way we architect and deliver our decision logic, considering all the changes that came due to the cloud environment? I'm glad to be here with you today, and I am Karina Varela. I've been working with enterprise applications for more than 10 years now, mostly Java-based applications in different sectors around the globe. So I can kind of see how things work and how things changed from like 10 years or 15 years until now. And some of the things we see that showed up actually changed the way we deliver software, how we manage the life cycle of our application development, also the way we select our technologies, and for the implementation of business rules, we also had new things that came around. Like, for example, the recognition by OMG, the same organization which takes care of the BPMN standard. They also recognized DMN, Decision Modeling Notation Standard. And we also had the Foundation of Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the CNCF, showing the how important cloud-based applications are getting today, and also the power of the communities involved with it. We also see improvement around the Java ecosystem and how new technologies brings new, better and faster ways to develop applications, to run it, and to deliver it, okay? So with all these changes, we notice several options in the ecosystem to choose from. So whenever we are starting a new application, we can either use our resources to configure the hardware, the infrastructure for applications, or we could delegate it and hire, for example, infrastructure as a service. We could also choose to have our developers focusing on our application code, and instead of having them learning, for example, about Kafka and event streaming, they could just choose to go with an event streaming platform, event streaming as a service, like, for example, a managed event streaming service, like the one that is offered today by Red Hat. Other things that we see changing in the market is the trends that are coming that are actually empowering all the evolving standards and patterns that we see on the technical side. So business are looking on how they can actually deliver intelligent, composable business, which means that they are creating an organization that is made from interchangeable building blocks. When we look at this from an organization perspective, And when we look at this and compare it to the technical aspect of the solution that we can deliver, you will see that this matches a lot of things that are happening on our technical side. For example, the decision in between going with a monolithic or microservices-based architecture, where you have a single application to deliver everything you have, or when you decouple your services in a way that each service is responsible for doing one thing and one thing only. But when we start moving to a microservices-based architecture, we'll see that we'll start having different services, independent services, that are involved in a same business flow. And in order to make this communication in between these services, in order to make the bigger picture happen, we actually we can choose in between different strategies. We could go, for example, and implement a multiple endpoint to endpoint communication. In this solution, you will have each service talking directly to the other one, and troubleshooting and tracing here can become super tricky. You could also go with orchestration or event-driven architectures, which is also becoming really popular today. In event-driven architectures, we have these services still being independent, and instead of having a centralized component to invoke that contains the logic and invokes these other services in order to achieve the business flow, which would be orchestration, we would have these services only emitting events that are critical to the ecosystem, or consuming events that are important for their logic. So, for example, let's say that the inventory service is there listening to a topic. It's listening to a topic. It's subscribed to a topic, waiting for events to happen on the ecosystem. On the other hand, we have the fulfillment service. The fulfillment service, whenever it finishes an important thing, it will just emit an event. Let's say this blue star here. It will emit an event. Hey, I finished this order, for example. The inventory service will see that an event happened, and that event is important, and it needs to react to it and file it and finish its processing in the inventory scope. So it will react to this event and make whatever it needs to do. So this way of creating independent services that interact via events is also becoming popular. And when we go back to the way we implement, and we will go back to this point in a minute, but before that, we need to talk about how we code our business logic, how we implement that today. We do know that there are good and well-established standards like the BPMN standard to help us deliver business flows, workflows. We can also use AI constraint solvers to help us optimizing the way we use our resources. We could implement our rules using code, using DRL, using different options, and we could go and also implement them in a way that is easily readable and maintainable by people who are not expert developers. In this example here, I have a table that is actually taking a decision, So if I have an input, I will know exactly what the output should be. So in this way, we can have the developer creating the service, and if needed, the business person can also look at it, change it, and help maintaining the business in a really fast pace. So we can go and implement this solution using not only good patterns and good technologies on the technical aspects, for example, choosing a lightweight runtime, choosing a container-based deployment strategy, but we could also make good decisions on the code level, where our code is implemented using standard-based approaches. And when you use standard-based approaches, you're actually getting rid of all the vendor locking. So today we are going to focus on DMN. And here, let me show you a project, Maven-based project that runs with Quarkus. So Quarkus is our runtime, and it has Cogito helping power the implementation of the decisions. So we have an implementation of a decision that will be made. So this is a traffic violation decision. Should I suspend the driver? This is the decision being made. In order to make this decision, I also have to define which is the fine to be applied to this driver. And as you see, I have the inputs to this decision, to the fine decision, which is the violation type, or what is the difference in between the actual speed and the speed limit. And based on this, each of these rows is a rule. Based on this, I can define, for example, the fine amount and the fine points to be applied to that driver. Depending on this, I can define if the driver should or shouldn't be suspended. And it's easily written like this and readable because of the feel language, which is a friendly enough expression language, which is also part of the DMN specification. And here we have everything we need in order to deliver our microservice already. We have the decision to be made, and we have the runtime. So Cogito will pick up this model, which is actually XML in the backend. What allows me to visualize it inside my VS Code is my extension, the business automation bundle. So Cogito is going to take this XML, parse it, and generate all the REST endpoints in a domain-based way. So we can invoke, for example, should the driver be suspended, the traffic violation REST endpoint. In order to define this, we can send in and get the results in also a domain-based way. So this can make the integration easier for our ecosystem. Although I was talking about having a event-driven architecture, right? So how can we achieve this? What if I used Cogito, which is a continuation of well-established projects like Druze, JBPM, and Octaplanner, along with Quarkus, to deliver this microservice in an event-driven way, where it is actually listening to a topic in Kafka. Kafka is a project for event streaming. It is actually listening to a topic. And whenever we ask the decision to be made based on that, on some inputs, this service knows that it needs to react, and it will make the decision and post the results into another topic. And like I said, any other service in the ecosystem that needs to act based on that response will get the event and make a decision upon it. So here's what happened when we mix the power of these technologies along with one of the most popular ways that we have to deliver a implementation of decision logic using standards. So here, I don't have any Java class. Everything will be generated by Cogito. What I do need is a way to connect to my Kafka topic. And also I don't need any glue code because I am using an extension for small RAI. And I am saying, hey, this is my incoming stream. It is, and it should be like anything that is posted to this topic, I'm going to react to it. And I'm going to post all the results to this other topic here. In order to see this happening, I didn't have to worry about my Kafka environment because, like I said, we have several options today in the market that help us deliver that. So if you go, for example, to red.ht/try-Kafka, you can order a cluster that will last for 2 days, and you can use it as you wish. So here I have my cluster running. and it has 2 topics. So once we look at the topics, it is exactly the ones that my application is going to interact with, okay? And I didn't have to worry about its configuration. Nice. So with this, how we can try this service? My application is deployed on OpenShift, which is a Kubernetes flavor where we can deliver our containers. So here I already have OpenShift listening to a repo on GitHub, and it grabbed the source code and built the image and have it running already here right now. And this service is listening to that Kafka. So whenever I use my producer to post a message to that topic, my service should listen to it and post back an answer. So let's see. What if I use, I send a driver that age is 25, has 19 points, and committed a violation speed with this speed here. Should this person be suspended? So we can see the output saying that yes. Although if we send over an input for a driver that has less points, we will see that this person should not be suspended. So all of this happened in an event-driven way. I didn't have to invoke my service directly. Cool. So this is one of the ways that we can deliver decisions on cloud environments. But what if I want to go a step further? What if I have a service that actually has a seasonal use? I don't need it up and running all the time. And when we're talking about cloud environments, we need to worry about cost a lot. And one of the features that we can make use of when deploying on Kubernetes-based environments with Knative, the technology named Knative, is this scale down to zero strategy for the deployment. So if we look here, this service, the one that we used, Kafka, it is up and running with 1 pod. It has 1 container running. Although I also have one that is not running, we can see that it's outscaled to 0. And it's scaled to 0 because nobody is consuming it. This application is the same application that I just used, but it's not listening to Kafka topics. It is actually interacting via REST. So let's send over a request to this service. So OpenShift is exposing it to me via this URL, okay? And I can just invoke the traffic violation endpoint. Like I told you, it was auto-generated based on the DMN name. And I will send in the inputs. Notice, so pay attention to this pod, because we will see that whenever I send in the request, the REST request, to evaluate this decision, this pod will scale up. So I've just sent the request. The pod is scaling up. I already got my answer. Why did I got the answer so fast? Because this application was compiled with native compilation using GraalVM and Quarkus, deployed natively. And when you run native application, the startup time is super quick. So once I started, I invoked it. The container was created, the application started, and already processed my decision and sent me back my response. Knative will keep on listening to the ecosystem, to the environment. So we see here the pod running, and whenever it gets to a lifetime, to an age of 80 seconds, sort of, it will start killing the pods because it doesn't need it anymore. So it just scale down, and Knative serving will keep on listening to whichever new request that comes into this service. So this is a great way to deliver decision that is not that frequent, that you can save costs on cloud environments, but also be performant in your responses. Or you can deliver event-driven applications by decoupling your, just a second. So yeah, and we can see that it's already terminating here, it's deleting the pods. So you can also deliver event-driven applications by having your services connecting to Kafka, but not only that, by implementing your decision logic based on standards that are recognized by an organization like OMG that is well established. And with all of that, you can have an environment that will be easy for developers to use, great for business users to read and help maintain, easy and lightweight to deploy, cloud native, and also you can make use of several options for application services like Kafka, API management, and many others that are out there in the market. So that was all I had to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to know more about these technologies, feel free to access the links that are shared here. And feel free to get in touch too. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here with the headlines. First up on Devops.com is an article that looks at driving software delivery automation with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Automation has been a focus for the information and communications technology industry for years, and there are some lessons that could apply to the software developer community, as well as other verticals. Today, more streamlined execution of operational and software delivery processes, such as CI/CD and continuous deployment in application development, continue to drive new levels of cost reductions, allowing products to get to market and update faster. However, with the increased amount of data comes more complex ecosystems and the need for the next level of automation. Hyper-automation, or the use of AI and ML to further streamline processes, could build on these CI/CD processes, revolutionize the way multiple industries deliver software, and optimize operational processes. This article looks at potential use cases of hyperautomation for the delivery and maintenance of telco software solutions, many of which can be applied to other sectors. And we look at how retailers can thrive in the face of online competition. It feels like a long time since the beginning of the pandemic, when we could actually freely go out and shop for whatever we needed and service could be found across the counter. The landscape of consumer services has now changed irreparably. Online marketplaces, which have increasingly dominated much of consumer purchasing habits since the 2000s, became increasingly monopolistic. Amazon, eBay, and other e-commerce platforms are now a one-stop shop for pretty much everything, made possible by the creation of complex global supply chains and unmatched economies of scale, in combination with nationwide distribution centers and an army of delivery drivers. But these tech-enabled big retailers cannot offer everything to a customer. In many cases, they lack the expertise that smaller independent vendors can offer, and this is where an advantage can be found. This article looks at the shift to digital shopping and ways in which retailers can thrive in an environment that is dominated by the e-commerce giants by embracing technology that provides a customer-centric experience, not simply adopting technology for technology's sake. In news, Oxeye has emerged from stealth and launched a namesake application security testing platform that pinpoints issues in code and provides advice to best remediate them. The Oxeye platform requires developers to download an observer tool that scans code for vulnerabilities. Once pinpointed, The Oxeye platform guides developers through the remediation process without requiring them to inject agent software in every application. As application environments become more complex, thanks to the rise of microservices-based applications, it's more likely that developers will make mistakes when it comes to application security. The only way to resolve security issues before applications are deployed in a production environment is to augment developers using a platform that finds vulnerabilities all the way down to specific lines of code. Many organizations today are challenged with finding a way to empower developers to address security issues without slowing down the rate applications are built and deployed. The best way to achieve that goal is to give developers access to a security tool that is designed to both analyze code for vulnerabilities and explain how to avoid encountering the issue again. That is what Oxeye is designed to do. All right, over on Container Journal, we look at ways in which organizations can protect Kubernetes from ransomware threats. A historic number of companies worldwide are flocking to the cloud as they adapt to this long-term remote work movement. Many are also adopting Kubernetes as their default container orchestration tool. Because of its portability, flexibility, and multi-cloud capabilities, the open-source container orchestration platform has exploded in popularity. IT executives have jumped at the chance to leverage Kubernetes benefits, but so have cyber attackers. The recent wave of attacks against organizations' cloud environments is an excellent example of this, as cybercriminals seek to take advantage of the mass shift to the cloud to steal critical company data through security gaps. As a result, the security of Kubernetes has never been more critical. As the cost of these attacks skyrocket, every organization must boost their Kubernetes security hygiene. This article discusses ways in which organizations can secure their Kubernetes environments to successfully stop attack attempts in their tracks and ensure the security of their Kubernetes infrastructure. And we have the latest from Microsoft, which has expanded its portfolio of tools and platforms for building cloud-native applications using containers to include a preview of Azure Container Apps, a fully managed serverless container service for building microservices that scale dynamically based on HTTP traffic, events, or long-running background jobs. At the core of that service is Kubernetes event-driven autoscaling, which adds a module to a Kubernetes cluster that explicitly maps applications to an event-driven platform, and the Dapper set of APIs that simplify building distributed applications, and open-source Envoy proxy software. Microsoft also updated Azure Arc, the control plane for distributed computing environments that is based on Kubernetes, making it more tightly integrated with both VMware vSphere and the hyper-converged infrastructure instance of Azure Stack that Microsoft makes available for on-premises IT environments. Microsoft also announced these and other announcements at its recent Ignite 2021 conference, where it made it clear that it believes cloud-native applications that scale dynamically as required will define the next application era. Judging from its latest announcements, Microsoft is readying itself accordingly. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we look at the results of a workforce study that shows burnout is becoming a real issue in cybersecurity. At the same time, job satisfaction is at an all-time high. These are the findings from the ISC Squared Workforce Study, which also found global cybersecurity workforce needs to grow 65% to effectively defend organizations' critical assets. Moving into 2022 and beyond, security practitioners will find that certifications are still valued most, as they act as a stamp of credibility for applicants. However, other skills such as problem solving, communications, experience, adaptability, and willingness to learn will gain more importance as cybersecurity as an industry continues to evolve. And finally, we look at what organizations need to know about DNS hijacking, not a new cybercrime, but one that remains particularly nefarious. By the time an organization discovers that a DNS hijacking has occurred, its security has already been breached and the damage is mounting. For organizations that have been victimized, such attacks can have monumental impacts. To avoid this, the best course of action is to know the dangers and deploy the right security mechanisms in advance to prevent hijackers from ever having a chance to strike. DNS hijacking can occur when login information is compromised at any point in the company registrar-registry communication chain, whether through the use of weak passwords, broad sharing of login credentials, falling prey to social engineering schemes, or overlooking some other security gap. Attackers who gain access to any account in the company registrar-registry communication chain can do some serious damage. With the ability to change where a company's website points, attackers can intercept and direct traffic to fake servers. They may be able to lure customers into unwittingly disclosing login credentials and personal information, and they may be able to do the same for employees, gaining deeper network access. They may also infect victims with malware to further compromise configurations to the hijacker's benefit. DNS hijackers also have the capability to take a business completely offline, bringing commercial activity to a screeching halt. This article does a deep dive into DNS hijacking and what organizations can do to protect themselves from it. All right, that's it for the headlines today. Please check back with me on Thursday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, I hope you have a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Steve Bomberger, who is the head of a company called SEI Sphere. Steve, thanks so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today. Do appreciate it.
Thanks, Charlene. Appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about SEI Sphere.
Sure. So SEI, the organization itself, has been around for 50 plus years. And we've been a financial institution and a regulated entity, as well as sort of a fintech company for those 50 years. We focus a lot on investment processing, investment operations, and asset management. So naturally, we've had to be sort of a data steward for our clients for a very, very long time. SEI Sphere is a new and exciting division within SEI, where we've looked back across our history of 50 years and looked at some of the core technology capabilities that we've been able to do very well over that period of time. And we've packaged that and built some things around it and are now in market servicing a lot of small to medium-sized businesses across industries and delivering them a complete end-to-end cybersecurity solution and other IT solutions. So this isn't by nature, a tool or a product or just consulting services. SEI's heritage has always been in delivering a more robust, client-focused business outcome solution. And we're really excited to be in the market now with this cybersecurity solution and some of the other kind of core IT capabilities that we know we've done very, very well for a long time.
Well, that's pretty awesome. All right, great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you guys are seeing in the space regarding cybersecurity and maybe how it's evolved over the last 18, 19 months or so during the pandemic. And, as we know, everybody's businesses kind of got turned on their heads because of the pandemic, and employees had to work from home, and a lot of them still are full-time. Some companies are now have adopted a hybrid work model, which, obviously that changes things in so many organizations and how they traditionally have viewed cybersecurity. So I'm kind of curious to find out if what you guys are seeing in the space, how are organizations kind of making cybersecurity changes to reflect this kind of new way of working, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I enjoy the topic. I appreciate that. I mean, clearly the pandemic was sort of a great stress test for business continuity and for those plans for all different types of organizations. Going from a matter of days where you have the majority of your workforce in an office to them being remotely working at home or in other locations was a pretty dramatic shift for most organizations. I think at SEI, kind of going on that heritage that I talked about, we were a little bit fortunate that the nature of our business as a financial institution and technology company We were fairly well prepared for the scenario, but by no means was that like, okay, fine, no problem. Let's just keep going as we're doing it. I think each organization in their current maturity of where they were at that point in time certainly had to step back and evaluate sort of policies and procedures. For us, it was a great opportunity to assess where we were at that point in time and how our cybersecurity aligned with our business strategy. So what were our policies like in place? Was our infrastructure and our equipment in a spot where we really could kind of move forward in this direction in a quick and secure way? We have to look at connectivity. I mean, obviously, connectivity is everything. We live in a digital world now. We're all connected with ourselves and with the internet and with clients. So that was a big part of kind of looking at it. And then also look at user behaviors, look at employees, and what are the tools that our employees are doing are using to do their jobs. And then you have to wrap security around all of this. I think one of the biggest things that probably most organizations had to deal with was communication. Not that organizations probably weren't communicating internally beforehand, but it became pretty critical to effectively communicate and communicate more often. We talk about cybersecurity, we talk about risk. It's not an IT problem. It's a company-wide issue. So when you're looking at that shift that we went through, HR teams, legal and compliance teams, risk management teams, IT teams, executive managements, they all had to sort of come together to evaluate their current stance and then think about how they were going to move forward. So that cadency and that frequency of sort of interdepartmental communication and rapidly increased. I think the other thing too that we've seen a lot just in the press lately is executive management's taken note. This used to be a pain, and now it's a top of mind issue that executive committees have to deal with, and they have to communicate with the street, with their customers, and with their employee base. So this interconnectivity has really created that increased desire and need for communication amongst organizations. That's been probably the biggest shift that we've seen.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the executive leadership now really kind of taking an active role, it seems like, in cybersecurity, because to your point, it was always somebody else's job to do. It's like, we'll have the CISO take care of it, and we'll never ever talk about cybersecurity because that's not what it's all about. It's all about running the business and making a profit. Cybersecurity has always been kind of a business expense, and now they're recognizing that it's more than just an expense. It's actually it is a lifeline for the company. Without proper cybersecurity controls in place, they could lose everything. And to your point, communication is so important now because we do have a widespread workforce. They're not talking to each other all the time. If somebody gets a weird email or something like that, there's really nobody to kind of stick their head over the cubicle and say, "Did you get this email? I'm not sure if this is legit." There's really not that sounding board there. So I feel like organizations kind of lost something when we're looking at kind of the boots on the ground perspective of cybersecurity by having all of their workforce remote. So I guess if I can say this, the timing was actually kind of perfect for the executive board or the executive leadership to really start taking more of a hand in the day-to-day, or at least have a better understanding of what was happening with cybersecurity, because they needed to. I mean, the time was now for them to do that. But that said, I almost feel like we're getting to a point where where a lot of the threats that are coming in, especially when it comes to phishing, those threats are becoming so much more sophisticated that I'm not sure that that even having the executive leadership take part in cybersecurity is going to be enough. So, what's the next step for companies?
Yeah, I think you hit an interesting point. We talk a lot about what's next for us, for organizations. We're dealing with this permanent remote work mindset or hybrid mindset. If you look back at some of the data before this, you probably had depending on what studies you're reading, 3 to 5% of employees working from home. Now, the numbers could be 40 to 50% in perpetuity going forward. So,
right.
Organizations, to your point, executive leadership, they're thinking now, we plugged a hole right now. How are we going to operate going forward? The mindset about culture and cybersecurity and how those two interact together has become a pretty interesting kind of interconnected point. If you think about what you described as the sophistication of an increased frequency of malicious actors, the way they're collaborating, the frequency at which they're attacking, company culture, as well as, the force of attack in this new hybrid environment, which has extended the footprint, has really caused kind of a perfect storm for organizations to have to deal with. When we think about culture, we think about collaboration and innovation and growth. We've worked in a highly operated and regulated environment for a very, very long time. And marrying kind of that cybersecurity and risk management culture along with sort of this innovative and growth perspective is a challenge that I think a lot of organizations are going to have to go through. So to your point that the future, I think executive management companies are going to have to challenge themselves to view cybersecurity as really a growth enabler instead of kind of a growth inhibitor. And then kind of marry that along with the cultural mentality of kind of entrepreneurship in nature. There was a colleague of mine that gave a quote the other day, and I'm going to try to find it so I can get it right here somewhere. I don't want to mess it up. He said, if your employees are working remotely, your data and your clients' data may be working remotely too. So where your people go, the data go, and cybersecurity must follow. And I thought that was a great quote. So, not only is executive management going to have to think about the policies and the procedures, but they're going to have to make sure that all the teams are working together and there is a defense in depth mindset put in place to support this work environment that we're all moving towards in the future. That's layered resiliency. That's understanding that we've expanded the footprint and that there is a need for endpoint protection. There's a need for visibility, whether somebody's sitting in your office or whether they're working from home or working in some restaurant somewhere. Aggregation of that data, putting some of those operational tools in place and being able to integrate all of those to an outcome, to a business outcome, is really where organizations need to get to. So just plugging the hole and saying, I got a tool here, I got a tool there, that's not going to work for the future of the organization. You're going to need to aggregate all of that and turn that data into an intelligence, and that intelligence will make the company stronger from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, I would also posit that organizations really need to take a security first mindset when they're, in pretty much everything they're doing, because, to your point, security can be a business enabler, and organizations these days are under so much pressure, just from the market in general and from their competitors to be better. So, when it comes to cybersecurity, I do believe that has got to be top of mind for them, and not kind of that whole idea of just bolting it on at the end. It's really got to start from, if they're doing application development, it's got to be part of the, the ideation to creation to production to, just out the door. And even with business processes and people processes as well, cybersecurity's got to be a major part of the conversation. So I expect that we're going to see a lot more happening in the way of education and training employees regarding cybersecurity practices and methods, and just practicing good cyber hygiene in general. So, what are you guys seeing in the space regarding that level of training and education with employees, both new and existing, with organizations? Do you think that that training is getting as much mind share as it should be right now, or are you guys seeing an increase, or are we still kind of just trying to figure things out?
Yeah, I will. I'll hit on the first part of what you talked about there, because I think it's really important. I think in today's climate, we talk about what successful companies differentiate with. And I think cybersecurity as a growth enabler. So thinking about organizations that know trust is their biggest differentiator right now, those are the organizations that are going to build and nurture that strong cyber culture sort of into the future. So I think that's a really, really important topic that you hit on there. I think, talking more about what some of the things that we're seeing are, user education, absolutely critical. We do see an uptick. Obviously there's the phishing testing, there's those kind of things that you do by nature, but certainly user education is the most paramount thing right now. There is no, as everybody knows, there's no 100% perfect silver bullet for cybersecurity. But we also all know that our weakest link is our employee, is people. And with our kind of the surface area exploding and our employees, as the weakest link are now all over the place, certainly that's exacerbated the entire situation. So we also know that, user education can only go so far. We're human. We're going to have bad days. We're going to make mistakes. We might click on a link that we probably wouldn't have clicked the day before because we were sidetracked on something else. So pairing that user education with really, really good policy, and then wrapping behind that operational security is really where kind of you get to that dome or that control of where you think you're doing, as much as you can around cybersecurity. To me, I think about, we look at it in a policy framework from an employee's perspective. We look at it from a policy framework, from a connectivity framework, from an operational perspective, and from kind of a risk management perspective. I need to understand as an employee, where my guidelines are. What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? So 5 years ago, I could have plugged in a USB device into my computer and downloaded information. I can't do that anymore. So just sort of understanding that those guidelines and the parameters, to your point, getting a little bit smarter about, what phishing campaigns look like. That's all very, very important. But then pairing that with the confidence as an employee that I'm going to get because I know there's the operational support and there's the tools behind me, that's going to allow me to continue to be productive on behalf of the organization. So it's, that education translation all the way through to making sure that I feel confident as an employee and I'm going to be able to produce the results that my employer expects from me.
That's great. That's great. And I think you hit it there. I think if organizations, put forth the effort to make sure that their employees have the tools and the training they need to have a strong cybersecurity posture, I think that's the way it's going to be moving forward. I don't think that any company that does not put security first is going to be in business for very long, unfortunately. But Steve, thanks for having the conversation with me. I enjoyed it very much, and I certainly do appreciate your expertise. So thanks for coming on Techstrong TV.
Great to meet you, Charlene. Thanks for having me.
Great. You bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here again with Luke Tenery, who is a partner over at Stone Turn. Luke, thanks for coming back and seeing me. It's always great to see you.
Thanks, Charlene. Great to be back.
All right, great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of this, what's been happening in the government space regarding cybersecurity, and specifically some of these proposed cyber reporting regulations that are kind of on the table right now. It's really fascinating to have the conversation about public policy and cybersecurity, partly because I don't know that. Well, maybe this is just a personal thing, but I'm not quite sure that the government has had as big a hand as it could have in cybersecurity up until now, and the fact that that there's so much noise happening up at the federal government space right now as it pertains to cybersecurity, I think is actually kind of a good thing. Because it does raise the collective awareness of the importance of cybersecurity. But interested in kind of getting your take on where you see this, whether this proposed cyber reporting regulations, whether it's going to have any teeth, and really what the public sector and the private sector really need to do to kind of make sure that it is successful.
Sure. Great question and good observation. I think overall, 2021 obviously has been an active year. We, had the aftermath of SolarWinds, Colonial Pipeline. I would summarize where the government has been, at least for this new administration, they very quickly established policy in terms of working to take action through one or more of the executive orders. They've made significant hires to build out the team to help them make that policy. And I think further, they've started to begin to ask more of the enforcement agencies likely as well to influence things like reporting, Charlene. So an example might be with FBI and DOJ. They have a reporting mechanism for certain cybercrime activities. The SEC just recently really went after, from a material perspective, with Pearson's, I think is a global organization based out of the UK, for under-reporting, at least for their shareholders, potentially market-moving information where they didn't fully disclose all the attributes of that particular incident that they had and the impact that it had on customer information. But I do think they want more data. On the flip side of that, I'm pleased with what I've been seeing, particularly with the CISA or CISA and its growth from a working to build resiliency and the overall response function of the national security or critical infrastructure cyber apparatus. So I do think it's still, this is formative year one, and it's a highly dynamic landscape from a cyber perspective. But I do think raising the bar of required notifications will bring greater visibility to possible other vulnerabilities that our nation needs to protect.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I guess in their defense, the previous administrations have put some level of awareness around cybersecurity and have they had their initiatives as well. But this one really seems like they've got there's some teeth, in this one, and there are some real solid actions that are actually happening right now. I mean, we just had word of the Department of Justice. They just started. They created a national cryptocurrency enforcement team that is now, that's part of the civil cyber fraud initiative that the U.S. government has enacted, and they're being specific in a lot of these things, and I really think that is what's been needed at the government level for a while, and so I feel like we're actually making progress at the government level in not only in raising awareness, but actually doing things to help secure and really crack down on areas where cybersecurity has not been maybe I don't want to say aware. We haven't really had that level of awareness, but it just hasn't been as enforced as well as it could be. So Am I right? I mean, it seems like there's a lot more happening than in years past.
100% agreed, Charlene. If we had one of those fancy media opportunities, there'd be a montage rolling of all the regulatory news headlines right now. But we're also seeing that with our clients in terms of an uptake in regulator inquiry. Big news just recently also that you mentioned on working the DOJ in particular and additional disruption to ransomware and extortion payments, greater emphasis being placed on controls around those payments being made. I think we're going to see, we're kind of dubbing 2022 and the look ahead there as the year of enforcement. We're already seeing signals, whether it be DOJ, SEC, the FTC, and taking their own specific angle, whether it be focusing on, disrupting the cyber criminal machine and enterprise. I think that is taken an extreme focus. And I also think protections around the government is still acutely aware of the need to protect our citizens and our consumer information, particularly in the cloud. You're seeing FTC active in that space. It's really a multi-fronted effort. And it's clear to me that it's likely that the administration has challenged the different agencies, even in the absence of, some sort of watershed, new legislation. They've really been active, and you can tell influencing and working with the regulatory agencies to really pressure, and I would say probably even likely double down in some of their activities to protect citizens, but then also, protect our defenses and or disrupt the cybercrime enterprise.
So where then because we're talking a lot about, at the government level and the public sector, where does private sector fit into this conversation? How can organizations kind of get in on this and reap the benefits that all this legislation, ostensibly will provide? But, we have been talking a lot at the federal government level. So, basically, what does this mean for private companies then?
That's a great question. This is something that's been in the works and really evolved and had different iterations over the last 20 years. And some efforts more successful than others, but I would say I'm still pleased. I know I keep coming back to CISA and the model that they're establishing. They've established new leadership with that team. I would equate it to almost sort of a hub and spoke model, Charlene, in the sense that we have, a variety of larger airports or industries throughout the country, but we still have, smaller market airports that still need to connect into those. And they all each have their different needs, or think about how the local supermarket works with all its different distributors to bring efficiency and maximize cost and or minimize costs, but then get the right information or the right products at the right time. The costs are different to ship milk than they are other products like cereal on the shelf. And so those are HIPAA, healthcare, et cetera, has different needs from a security and protection perspective than does big tech, but still like having government talk the right language to both of those does not happen overnight. And there's different lexicons. And so there's a great diversity to this, but there are great steps being made. I think with CISA in particular, they brought in a new leader that has experience, particularly from Morgan Stanley in the financial space. And the concept is this building out of a fusion center, or probably multiple fusion centers being interconnected, including critical infrastructure, as well as other aspects of private industry, along with government, to kind of build this hub and spoke apparatus of appropriate information sharing. And I think we'll see more maturity happening in that over the coming year. They've really, built some foundational policy, as I mentioned. And as you know, there's a talent shortage. It takes spend. New infrastructure doesn't get built overnight. But I do think in 2022, you're going to see some of the fruits of that connectivity coming together, along with sort of the regulatory enforcement angle to ask more of private industry probably as well.
Well, I think those are positive moves and positive steps. And I'm anxious to see whether 2022 will actually kind of bear some of those fruits. Moving forward, like from today. So, we talk about all these things that are happening, and 2022 is, just actually a couple months away. I hate to say that, but yeah, it's just a couple months away. So, I mean, how long do you think it's actually going to take? If we're going to see enforcement start to happen in 2022, are we talking about 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? And at what level are we going to see? I mean, is it going to be across the board, do you think, or is it going to be kind of dribs and drabs of enforcement?
I would say I think it's already starting, Charlene. And in a lot of ways, it can be sort of silent because organizations deal with these inquiries from government, with, legal counsel or other possible legal issues that don't always see the light of day. So my just general sense is that some of those inquiries are already happening. But, the FTC and SEC have been both very active in their pressers in terms of the actions that they're taking on certain target organizations. But I think we should also think about flipping the script, though, a little bit. We still have adversaries globally or underground cybercrime actors, and infiltrating those and or disrupting the sort of the criminal, I'll just call it this criminal supply chain.
Sure.
That doesn't happen overnight, and candidly, we won't know how successful some of those operations are because we just don't get visibility into those from a law enforcement and their dealings from a national security potentially or criminal law enforcement perspective. But I do think from speaking with some of our team that are recent, graduates from either national security or federal government, that there's still a long way to go in terms of some of the international cooperation that we have with other law enforcement agencies overseas. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a critical part globally is, not just thinking about what we're asking domestically our equities to do to defend or notify, but let's remember there are adversaries that are, conducting violating law and, with, means to continue to attack us. And so it's just not what we can dictate policy to defend, but, something has to happen to disrupt the actors. We have to remember that there's criminals on the other side of this that need handcuffs.
Yeah. And that's perhaps the toughest nut to crack there because, some of them are actually being funded by nation states. And so, how do you get past that? I mean, it's definitely a thorny issue, and I'm very, very happy to see that that progress is being made here in the States. I hope internationally we'll see some real progress as well. And I agree with you that 2022 is going to be a year that we do see some enforcement, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll see some real change when it comes to cybersecurity and at least the level of threats that are being directed at us today. Hopefully that'll be decreased in both severity and the number of threats, starting next year with these enforcements, and recognizing that cybersecurity is about to get a whole lot stronger, hopefully, knock on wood, than it has been in the past. But Luke, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on Techstrong TV. I hope you'll come back another time.
Great, Charlene. Looking forward to it.
All right, perfect. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Next up, we have Mitch Ashley in his Analyst Corner, in which he speaks with Katerina Pinto, who is the Digital Transformation Manager at Henkel Corporation, and she discusses low-code and how it is playing a huge role in Henkel's digital transformation by connecting remote employees with 30 shop floors around the globe. Andrew Manby from HCL Software also is on this discussion. Henkel is using the HCL Volt VX technology to as part of their digital transformation efforts. It's the low-code technology that HCL Software offers, and this is a great kind of case study on how low-code is helping an organization with its digital transformation effort. Great stuff. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the really great pleasure of being joined by two very fantastic people talking about low-code, no-code, and some of the impact for digital transformation projects. First joining me is Katerina Pinto, who is the Digital Transformation Manager with Henkel. And she's Henkel Corporation. She's going to be talking about their project and the role of low-code and that has been taking place. And a returning guest, sitting in the right-hand chair is Andrew Manby, who's AVP Product Management with HCL Software. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
It's great to be back, Mitch.
Welcome back. Well, let's do this. Andrew, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, and then Katrina, I'll have you do the same. Tell us a little bit about Henkel, and then we'll go right into talking about your transformation project.
Right, perfect. So my name's Andrew Manby. I head up product management for our HCL Digital Solutions portfolio. My specific focus and passion is really around digital transformation and using low-code to do that. And our tool of choice here is Volt MX, our low-code tool for professional developers.
Funny, that's our topic today. Yes,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Here, Katerina, I am, as was said, Digital Transformation Manager here at Henkel. I'm based in Amsterdam, and I mainly work with the factories. So my goal is to lead part of the digitalization of the factories. I'm responsible in leading a global project that is the Connected Worker, where we basically aim to augment our workers in the shop floor. One of the biggest parts in this program is the Connected Worker apps, and that's made with Volt MX as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of interesting things been happening over the last 18 months plus. How long has this project, digital transformation project, been happening? Has it been more related to the pandemic, or is this part of the bigger program that's going on across the company?
This is part of the bigger program we have. It's one of our core pillars in the company, and it has been in full force since I joined, so 1.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you're part of the project. Would you say that's a big component of it, or one of several?
And this moment is the strongest component of it. So especially the Connected Worker apps. But we have a lot of things going on in our factories. We have a very powerful digital backbone. There are plenty of articles out there, business cases out there in terms of our digitalization in the supply chain, especially in laundry, where I sit in this business unit. And basically what we aim is to extend this super powerful backbone that connects our machines in more than the 30 sites that we have worldwide, and also give the extra information of the user. So the knowledge of the person that is operating the machines, that is making sure that the products are with extreme quality, that is making sure that everything is safe in the shop floor.
When we talk about the project you're doing and with remote workers to the factory floor, is that people who are across all 30 of those locations generally? Is it more concentrated in certain areas, locations?
No, we are a real global program. So whenever we deploy an app, it's for everyone. It certainly helped during the pandemic because there was less need for people to be all the time in the shop floor if they are not business critical, and you can still steal the information from far away about what is going on in the shop floor, and basically are establishing a new way of communication here.
Great. And are you most of the way complete with this project? Are you still in the sort of early throes of it? Where are you at on your journey for this particular initiative?
So I would say that we are certainly in the scale-up phase. So imagine this as a mini startup within the company where we see in the shop floor what are the processes that we can digitalize. So basically everything that is done in paper, we will try to create an app or incorporate in our ecosystem so that we allow this information to be part of our data lake and really have insights from that. So we will work on everything from designing the product based on customer needs. So a lot of needs finding that is out there. Product design is also on our feet. Then we do the development with 2 teams of developers in this moment that we have, one in Cairo, one in Serbia. And then we also lead the implementation within the factory. So it's a big project with a lot of scoping, and that really hits all the parts of the factory, be that continuous improvement, be that safety, quality, and other departments that we are also thinking about expanding to.
Yeah, mission critical for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the role of low code and the tools that you're using. Obviously, VoltMX being one of those, and I know you're not as an endorsement necessarily, but clearly you've partnered with HCL Software, and they're playing a role in this as also. Is low code type tools, is that something relatively new to Henkel, or have you been using those types of tools for quite some time?
So they are relatively new since the project started, I would say.
Okay.
But it was super important for us because we really wanted to be very quick to market. And since the beginning of the project, we kind of work like an Amazon company would do. So our goal is to get products that are unfinished into the shop floors, so MVPs, and make sure that we kind of use it as a playground with the people in the shop floor to get really user needs, to make sure that it's customized over 30 locations. So it's really important for us to be not only fast in getting the MVP, but also fast in getting the feedback introduction of our people. So we are very people-based, very customer obsessed. We really did this very big mindset shift in terms of it's not creating the whole product and then shipping, but delivering that iteratively with the people that will use it in their day-to-day. And here, low-code played a very important role because it allows us to be very fast in getting to the market needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very lean approach, doing MVP, rapid development iterations of your releases. So clearly that's a great use of low-code type technology. Andrew, are you working directly with Katerina on this in the organization, or kind of observing as part of the HCL team from a little bit more distance?
I would say, observing more about what they're doing. And I think there's a good interchange between our people in Europe working with Katerina and a team. We want to invest in some future innovation things that they're looking at as well. And to bring those and help Katerina. Because I think part of the value that I hear from customers is, us coming to the customer and saying, well, we're sort of seeing these trends. How do they apply to your individual business? And then take them through a period of, exploration to really try and understand what is your digital vision. Now let's get concrete on a specific area, and how does that innovation really help? I mean, I think, in terms of Henkel, they are a leading innovator in digital transformation. I mean, given, the types of things they're doing, they're very data centric, very outcome oriented. And I think this initiative dovetails. But, what delights me about what some of Katerina's point of view is very pragmatic. But it's, I think one of the things that you said, Katerina, is when you're interacting with the people on the shop floor, you've got to show the value to them directly, right? So if it's, I was thinking about the expression you have as not only simplifying their lives, but it's as easy as paper. It's got to be,
which is our biggest competitor. So in the end, it's really difficult to compete with, and that was really a key. It plays a key role that we really have the interest of the people. And if people feel ownership in the sense, oh, I asked for this feature, 2 days later it was there, it's so much more important. They understand. And in the beginning, I had to do a lot of push to say, no, please give me your feedback, bring me your problems. That's exactly why I am here. I'm contacting you every day. Until the problem today, that is, I get my inbox flooded with all the requests, and I don't know where to turn to. But I think it's a much better environment.
Yeah. So that's actually interesting, Katerina, because you've reached that sort of tipping point where it's actually, instead of being push, it becomes a pull.
Exactly, and
from the factories, which is tremendous. And I think you were also telling me where they're actually saying now is, we want these features and we want more iPads, right?
Yeah, and that's a big pull from the company as well. But I think it's I see it as a very positive insight into the program. Just building on the previous point, for example, we are trying to build now a product that also app-based, but the idea is that it will be a company-wide product, so be for all the functions within the factory. And especially in the beginning, I was a little bit unsure. I was thinking maybe this is too much. And then one of the factories just told me, hey, if you add these 2 little things, I can push this all over the factory. Like, okay. 1 week later, they were implementing in all functions. And I got, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even need to do marketing because it was one of their biggest needs. And we are really cooperating with HCL to really take this to the next level. And I think it will be a very awesome product.
What's interesting is over so much time, people have gotten conditioned when requesting technology, application systems. They don't get what they want very quickly. At least they haven't historically. And so I imagine it's a big shift, a big mind. Initially they didn't expect you to be able to deliver as quickly as you are. And now that they are, of course, they flood your inbox, right? Be careful what you ask for too, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I'm curious, how many people do you have working on the project? And is this inside IT? Is this outside of IT? How's it considered?
No, it's inside IT. So we have, in this moment, 4 developers sitting in 2 places, 2 kind of Scrum Master, say it like this. Mm-hmm. I act as product owner as well. So I have a lot of hats during the development of the products. So from end to end of the products, but that's basically the core of the team. So very, very small team. And we really need, it's like I said, it's like almost a mini startup. And we have ideas and we say, okay, find a way to do it. Let's do it. Let's put this into the ground and let's make people happy with what we do.
Are you doing sort of an agile 2-week sprint type
1 week sprint
approach?
type?
Or are you doing more DevOps, release it as it's ready, it's tested, it's ready to go?
In this moment, we are doing 1 week sprints. So really we, especially because we have a lot of apps simultaneously. So we have in this moment around 10 apps that are part of our major ecosystem that all need some kind of maintenance, or they have new requests from the guys in the shop floor, or I have new ideas that I want to implement. They are based obviously in customers' feedback. So it's really very, very fast. We don't release in all of the sprints, of course, but we try always to be very based on customer requests and super user-centric.
So how would you say using low-code, using VoltMX, the low-code kind of tools, how does that, is it fundamentally changed your ability to deliver that quickly? Is it that revolutionary? Is it sort of an evolution of a journey you've been on to get to this point? How would you describe it?
I think it certainly helps, and especially with the connection with HCL that provides a lot of support so that we can also take advantage of this low-code part, that we can create things that are repeatable, right? That we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time that we build something. And here really the time to market decreases, yes.
Interesting. I know something Andrew and I've talked about is the citizen developer, the professional developer, inside, sometimes both inside IT, can also be external. Would you consider your team more of a professional development team? That's their jobs, as being developers, or these citizens, business people sort of performing the development functions?
In this moment, a little bit more towards the professional developer team, because we really are not that big and we really have a lot of apps. So we really need to be a little bit more focused on that.
Interesting. I'm curious, Andrew, what do you see? You see some commonalities between things that are contributing to the success that Katrina is having at Henkel that you maybe have seen with other customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, our focus, Mitch, is predominantly in enabling, people like Katarina and Henkel with their professional development teams, and they don't need to be big teams. I mean, you can tell they're a very agile team, a very responsive team. It's very impressive to hear that. In our world, it's really that idea. If they've got the vision around the digital transformation and a willingness to be able to do that, we can help facilitate that to do that very quickly with them. And I think it's really that partnership. Sometimes, that's simply just being able to sit down, train, work with the customer, train them, build some prototypes. And sometimes it's a little bit more of a discussion around a business process that they want to re-engineer. And we have what we call a studio process where we can bring them in, we can reimagine or think about what that would look like, build a prototype, and then get the feedback from the people on the ground about whether that would work. And sometimes either of those approaches works. It just really depends, I think, on the maturity of the organization. But what I also find interesting, which is embedded in what Katarina was saying about the only if you add that couple of things, we're seeing that we did a session recently with Jared from Velco, which was up in Vermont, the Vermont electric company, and they're the nation's first purely distribution network, and they've got about 15 apps out there, and they're starting to think about how can they sort of consolidate some of those apps and build some super apps in the area of field service. So we're sort of seeing the folding in on some of those developments to go in new directions. But one of the impressions and the feelings I get talking to the customers, where they start and where they end up at two different places. I mean, like the old adage, right? There's always new ideas that come from customers that take them in different directions. In the case of Velco, they have a scientific application, which is part of a government reporting to say, in times of hot temperature, what's happening on the loading of the transmission lines. So that required them to integrate with MATLAB software and actually do some heavy computational analytics. So, I mean, what we're seeing is, people are asking the questions and we're sitting down with them and figuring out how to do it. So it's an exciting time.
It definitely is. And Katarina, sorry for stumbling on your name. I'm curious, success breeds more success, or certainly brings a lot of attention. And one of the things that's happened in this whole COVID time, acceleration of digital transformation projects, is as people have had success, other parts of the organization start looking at that and say, well, how come they can deliver in a week and we deliver every 2 months or every whatever? Are you getting some attention from the rest of the organization? Is that part of why you're adding more apps, or are other groups looking at potentially spinning up and doing low code kind of work?
A little bit of both. So from our organization, I would say yes, because we are really working. Maybe we are even extreme agile because we are 1 week sprints. But the mindset shift of delivering products to the shop floor that are not extremely ready, there are still to be improved. There are landing pages in apps that then are created with the people. I think it's an almost new paradigm shift that we are starting to see more and more and more. And people are also requesting things that are more useful for them for their daily lives. And one of the things that we are also doing is we are going into this exact idea of having less mini apps and have one core that connects our backbone to different modules, and the apps work basically as modules and puzzle pieces. And that's more or less type of ecosystems that we want to have. One thing that connects everything, that's basically our core, this big project that I was talking about, and then having the different workflows that the guys have to do every day to just piece in order to make the complete puzzle.
Well, wonderful. This has been fascinating. Thanks for sharing your story with us, and congratulations on your success, and congratulations also to the HCL software team with a very apparent happy customer and productive team using your technology and leading digital transformation. Katerina Pinto, thank you for joining us from Henkel, and Andrew Manby, thank you, of course, from HCL Software.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Shang Liang, who's president of engineering and innovation for SUSE, and we're talking about their acquisition of NeuVector, which adds a whole container security and Kubernetes security offering to the portfolio. Shang, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Where does NeuVector fit, and why did you feel the need to make this acquisition in terms of the rest of the portfolio? You guys have clearly SUSE bought Rancher, but where does NeuVector fit?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As you know, SUSE is a leader in Linux, and with the combination with Rancher, SUSE is also a leader in Kubernetes platforms. And where we see is as Kubernetes achieve mainstream adoption in the enterprise, our customers increasingly care about both the Kubernetes infrastructure level security, as well as a lot of the application workload security that runs on Kubernetes. Now, security has always been a strong focus of Rancher over the years. I think we pioneered a lot of the features like centralized authentication, RBAC, and more recently, Rancher supported CRS benchmarking. But having now NeuVector as part of the SUSE product portfolio, it adds the enterprise-grade capabilities, security capabilities for Kubernetes and for container workload, really push the security capabilities of SUSE platform to the next level.
Yeah. There's a lot of container security platforms out there. So why did you settle on NeuVector? What was it that attracted you to them specifically?
Yeah, we're very impressed with the product capabilities and technical capabilities of NeuVector over the years. SUSE has been, and Rancher as well, has been a partner of NeuVector for a number of years. And we felt that, in Kubernetes and security, these are just very, very fast evolving spaces. And there's a lot of innovation going on. And NeuVector brings some unique capabilities. One area we're particularly impressed with is their focus on network, using network inspection to look into the runtime behavior of containerized workload, which we really believe it's probably the least intrusive way to ensure the application level security of container applications. And NeuVector is also built around very much compatible with the zero trust paradigm that these days are increasingly being adopted by enterprise customers.
We hear a lot about DevSecOps. Do you think that the rise of containers and Kubernetes will force that issue finally, and we'll see more security responsibility shifting left? Or is there a little more of a nuanced relationship that needs to happen between developers and security people in a more of a team sport fashion? How are we going to solve this issue?
No, I think it's both. I mean, I think this is, security concerns is going to continue to shift left towards the developers, and I think Kubernetes and NeuVector, Rancher, these solutions are just a step in that journey. I don't think that will be the end of this whole shift left movement. Overall, security is an overriding concern of everyone in the organization. If developers fundamentally, do not guarantee, do not ensure that they develop secure applications, there's probably not much operators, DevOps person or IT ops person can do to ensure the fundamental security of the overall service. So it is really shared responsibility. And I think from end to end, from left to right, these days everyone is very much in tune with these requirements, and that's also totally consistent with where we're going with Rancher and NeuVector.
How automated do you think this might all get? Because when you talk to developers, they'll tell you, well, they're not necessarily security experts. They'd like to build more secure code, but it's not in their core DNA. And they need more help from the platform itself to secure the application runtimes and environments. So how will we get to that level of automation that we need?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Automation is absolutely the key. That is why we're bringing capability like NeuVector into the Rancher platform. Historically, the space Rancher resides is most people look at Rancher as a way to help them to create Kubernetes clusters on premise or on the edge, and then it's also a multi-cluster manager that enable them to manage all their Kubernetes clusters, whether they're RKE or K3S clusters they set up themselves, or the EKS and GKE or AKS clusters they have in the cloud. And then now you have Kubernetes. You're going to have to now worry about a whole nother set of security concerns in Kubernetes platform itself. And the nice thing about now having NeuVector integrated into Rancher with this acquisition is really developers and DevOps person would have to worry less, right? Out of the box, we will be able to offer a great deal of security guarantee, and so the developers can just put all of their focus on improving the applications, which directly contribute to improve business operations. And that's I think ultimately that's where the value is going to be created by these cloud native transformation efforts that IT departments are undertaking.
Do you think the bad guys have figured out containers, and are they getting better at exploiting them, or is it still early days? Because a lot of times you hear about cryptojacking, but a lot of people think of cryptojacking as kind of a nuisance crime. So how serious of an issue is this?
I think it's a very serious issue. There's been so that's why security space is always a cat and mouse game, and security exploits for containers have been going on for years. Started even before Docker, the older form of containers based on LXC, and then with Docker, then with Kubernetes. So and that's what stimulated the growth of the security industry around the Kubernetes ecosystem. And not just, there are a lot of new companies like NewVector that got started in the last 5-6 years, but also a lot of existing vendors, security vendors, whether they come from network security or application security or intrusion detection, they're increasingly paying attention to container and Kubernetes security. So it is very much at the forefront of the fight between the good guys and the bad guys, and we need to arm IT organizations and DevOps teams with great solutions, security solutions like NewVector.
As part of that, we hear a lot of emphasis on software supply chains. Should people assume that they're compromised and start looking for malware hidden in these containers that people sometimes randomly download from just about anywhere they can find them?
Yeah, software supply chain is a big issue, and that's why a lot of capabilities that were built into NewVector, from the image scanning to a lot of the runtime security capabilities, basically make sure that even if your container is compromised, they can't do much damage at runtime. So software supply chain is also very, very deeply embedded into the open source business model that SUSE has been pursuing for decades. One of the great value add that SUSE brings to the open source community is not just to support our those open source projects that we ship as products, but we make sure that the bits you receive from SUSE, they're properly signed, they're properly validated, and there will not be any supply chain software supply chain issues at Linux and at Kubernetes level. And then with tools like NewVector will also help you guard against software supply chain attacks at the application level.
One of the challenges I think people run into is that there are new vulnerabilities that emerge after they deploy a container. Sometimes they think that container is only going to run for a couple of seconds, but now we're starting to see longer running containers. And then they forget to update the container or replace that container, which is now running code in a production environment that has a newly discovered vulnerability, and then it may escape and take over the host and all this other stuff. Do you think we need to have more of a continuous process around all this stuff? Because, historically, even with monolithic applications, we weren't exactly great at patching them. And now at least we can rip and replace containers more easily. But I don't know if we have the right mechanisms or mindsets in place. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I don't think we can rely on all the customers, all the users to follow the best practices of, frequently patch their containers or their nodes. Sometimes the containers are okay, but the server nodes they run on, that can get compromised as well. We have a lot of customers that follow best practices. Like I've heard customers that they periodically, like once a month or even once a week, they'll rehydrate, basically kill all the servers and and reboot the servers with the latest OS images with all the patches. So that's clearly a great practice, but most of our users are not quite there yet. So that's why even rely on customers to patch or have a system like Rancher and Kubernetes, making that patch as non-disruptive as possible is only part of the solution. So that's also why the runtime security is so important, and that's a key capability that NeuVector brings. It's essentially with the NeuVector, as I explained earlier, the runtime security capabilities of NeuVector is built around network inspection. So it will sit there and will inspect the network traffic generated by your containers and your applications, and it'll compare against the known patterns or known attack patterns or the known good or bad behaviors of the applications, and it'll be able to protect you if something out of ordinary happens. So this is just a great capability that would keep your system safe, even if your supply chain is compromised or the somehow the latest patches are not applied in a timely fashion. So security is that's why it's such an all-encompassing full application development and deployment life cycle endeavor. It's not. It just cannot be solved in isolation. And as we start to apply, developer time security, CI time, CI/CD time, deployment time, operations time, then your whole system just becomes dramatically more secure.
All right. Last question. IT is getting more complex by the day. We have monolithic apps and we got microservices everywhere, and it's highly distributed. Do you think that maybe AI could save us from ourselves here, or does that have any role to play in the future of security as it relates to containers? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think AI has a great deal of role to play. In two areas, and they're deeply related. What I've seen, this is also some of the projects we're working on, like the OPNI project we started. It is centered around monitoring and operations. So I think AI has a great role to play to just look at the to inspect the very, very large amount of telemetry and metrics that these applications produce, and then on one hand ensure that application will continue to run reliably, and on the other hand, this is also a great place for AI to be to look at any sort of anomaly, any sort of behavior that could indicate a compromised image or compromised process, compromised container or bad code, and then take actions promptly. So I would certainly expect going forward more and more such AI technologies be integrated into platforms like NeuVector.
Very good. Hey, Sheng, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's great talking to you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. Just a quick reminder, we've got some great events coming up before the end of the year. Hopefully you will be able to join us we've got 2 virtual summits and 1 live event coming up. Woohoo! The first one is the Low Code, No Code event. This one is happening next week. It's November 18th. This is a virtual event, so you can always go check it out on techstrongevents.com. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers and a great agenda talking about all things low code and no code. So it's definitely one worth checking out. The next one is InnoTech Oklahoma City, happening December 1st. And guess what, guys? That's a live event. I'll be there. I'm so very excited. It's a one-day technology conference, and we've got all kinds of great speakers and tracks lined up, everything from cybersecurity to cloud native to DevOps and so much more. So I hope you can join me for that one. I'm so very excited about that. Did I mention how excited I am about that one? But the last one, rounding out the year, is happening on December 9th. This is a virtual summit. This is the FinCon DX Summit, and it also is going to be a great show. We've got a great lineup of speakers and a lot of great topics related to financial services and DevOps and application development, application security. It's really geared toward financial services, but I think that there's something for everybody at this show. So I highly encourage you to check it out also. You can take a look at techstrongevents.com and find out more information about all three of these shows coming up. You can look at the agendas. You can look at the speakers. You can even register. Yes, register, folks. It's going to be all three of them are going to be great shows. So I do encourage you to take part in some way, shape, or form. As far as Techstrong TV is concerned, I'll be back on Thursday. I'll have a fresh new show for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and whatever you do, please stay safe.